The meeting will come to order. Welcome to our May Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting. It's great to see everyone present on this rainy day, and we certainly appreciate everyone's presence. Our first matter of business is approval of the consent calendar. Are there any corrections to the minutes posted for our Committee of the Whole session on April 9th? If there are no corrections, I need a motion to approve the minutes.
Madam.
Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Cochran has made a second. It is moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our second matter of business is appearance of visitors. Do we have any speakers? Okay, we have no speakers. Thank you. Our third matter of business is instruction. Our first business item under instruction is 3.01 early college transition update. This item is for information only and was requested by Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell. Dr. Royster, I will turn this matter over to you to present our speaker and to make any introductory comments.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. As you noted, Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell had asked for a presentation related to the more specifics regarding the transition of the early college program from a standalone program physically located at the University Center to becoming a component program of 3 high schools in the district, with the goal of increasing the participation in the early college program and the goal of increasing the participation at those particular schools of students in dual credit programming. Those schools represented some of the lowest participation we have in the district by students in dual credit. Early college's independent location at the University Center has not been able to meet its recruitment goals to maintain a population, making it a viable standalone program. Although it has made significant academic gains with the students that are served in that program, we believe this provides an opportunity to leverage the positive aspects of this program, make it available to far more students, and operate it in a more efficient manner. At this time, I ask Ms. Dean to speak to the specifics of the program. In her current role, she oversees the program and will continue to oversee the programmatic aspects of it, though the employees in that program, as it's physically located in the 3 high schools, will report to the principals of those 3 schools. Ms. Dean?
Thank you. Thank you for letting me give a report on the update of our transition for Greenville Early College. So, of our current students that are in our Greenville Early College program at the McAllister site, 63 of those students were zoned for Carolina High School. 60 of those students have made a commitment to stay in the early college program at Carolina High School. 16 of the students, as you see here, were zoned for Berea. 10 of those 16 have made a commitment to stay in the early college program at Berea. And Southside, there were 11 students, and 8 of those students have elected to stay a part of that cohort at Southside High School. So this is an 87% retention rate. The students that are not participating in early college at those sites are, they are either didn't qualify for dual enrollment, so they would be housed at these schools, but they're not in the early college cohort. They're planning to attend another high school based on choice of those students. Some of them are moving out of Greenville County School District, and some of them are choosing to move to a charter school, private school, or homeschool. These 3 schools have been busy recruiting additional students, rising 9th graders and even rising 10th graders at their schools to participate in the early college cohort. So currently, Berea High School has recruited 105 students that are showing interest along with their parents to participate in this cohort. 120 students at Carolina High School. Parents and students are wanting to be in the early college cohort, and 100 in Southside. So this is a 3 300% increase over the current number of students in Greenville Early College at the present site. The question about what will continue that is in the spirit of Greenville Early College that we've heard so much about, and the things that will continue for these cohorts at these 3 sites will be, we have made a commitment to smaller class size. We have committed to having wraparound services. We're dedicating a school counselor that will work with these students along with other students, but they will follow these students from 9th grade through 12th grade as long as they stay in the early college program. There will be a lead teacher administrator that will be dedicated to that program along with other assigned duties. They will continue to do college visits, which is a very big, important part for early college. They will have access to transportation to and from those high schools to a Greenville Tech College campus, and this is huge for those students and for those schools because currently they don't have that. Continued community supports with OwnTrack and United Way is still making an investment in those 3 sites and that program. Community service opportunities. Every year, our Greenville Early College students have a community service project, a community service day. We've made a commitment to continue that part of this particular program. All the core classes for the students in the early college program will be located in the same area of the school, so they're not traveling all over. They will be together for those 4 courses. Each school will have, as I said, each school will have a staff member from the current Greenville Early College to help them with continuity and support, which is very important to these students, that they have someone they know there, and this is, I'm glad we made that commitment. Advantages. What are the advantages of relocating from the McAllister Square site to these 3 sites? Currently, Greenville Early College students, when they take biology, chemistry, physics, they do so in a regular classroom without a science lab. So they will have access to science in a room designated for those experiences. Students will have more elective opportunities, such as chorus, band, strings. Students will have access to all extracurricular opportunities. At this point in time, if a student wanted to participate in extracurricular, they had to go back to their home school and they had to provide transportation to them. Students will have access to AP, IB, and more dual enrollment courses taught on site at those schools. Each school has at least 2 current Greenville Early College staff members assigned to them, and those 3 sites got 2 above baseline positions for that purpose. This is a timeline of the activities and the recruitment and the parent meetings that the 3 sites made available, because one of the things in the parent meeting is the parents and the students were very worried about not being at the school, not seeing the school. So we set up tours for the students, as you can see there. When those happened for those 3 sites, those went very well. They also set up parent meetings for those current students so that the parents could have an opportunity to interact with the staff at those 3 sites. And they also set up recruiting meetings for new students and also parent meetings for those new students. I'm just going to give you a moment to look at this timeline of all the different things that Berea, Carolina, and Southside are doing to welcome and create that family-like atmosphere for those students. And that concludes my presentation. Are there questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Dean. That was an outstanding presentation and very encouraging to see that our program is going to grow. So thank you for sharing that. Do we have questions? First, Ms. Linda Leventis Wells.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, short, sweet, and to the point. I like it. But when I heard the students speak at our last meeting, some of them were concerned about fear, the uncertainty, you know, not knowing and used to an environment that they were they felt safe. And I know we've got 2 teachers from each at each location that these students are familiar with, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's a good point. And we're making sure that the students understand that they can go to these teachers if they run into any kind of conflicts or anxiety or.
Yes, not only the teachers from Greenville Early College, but we also in their tours and at the parent meetings, we made sure they knew who their counselor was going to be and who their administrative contact would be, so that they would feel safe with that. Some of our schools have more than 2 Greenville Early College staff there just because of openings, but all of them have at least 2.
Well, that's refreshing, and I appreciate that. And we will follow them throughout their transition, and if they remain at that location. The students that chose to go out of county or charters, it was a better fit for them.
Better fit for them, and some of them were already exploring that opportunity. This is a new thing for them, but some of them after the change, they looked for other opportunities they felt would fit them.
Thank you. Well, I'm very appreciative about transitioning and all that y'all are doing to make sure that they don't run into any other obstacles along the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. LaVentus Wells. Ms. Goodwin Caldwell?
Ms. Ford and her staff have done surveys, especially after the tours and after the parent meetings, to try to find out what the concerns or the fears still are happening. They are working. She's brought in the counselors from each of those schools after those surveys to meet one-on-one with each student to alleviate some of those anxieties. And I think we're in a better place. I spoke to a teacher yesterday afternoon from Early College, and they said that things are settling down and people are ready for the new opportunity. Right. About 3, just 3. They all have positions. They have all been assigned. Yes, ma'am. They will, right. There are more opportunities for dual enrollment when we don't have staff at those schools that can teach. For example, a biology 110. They may go to Greenville Tech to take that particular class since it's a dual enrollment class. All 3 of those high schools will have the opportunity to send students to Greenville Tech and maybe stealing your thunder, Mr. Williams, to take electricity. That's something that Mr. Williams has been working out. They also will have access to HVAC and also welding. So that they'll have those opportunities, but that's not a part of the early college program, but it is access that we have the buses, and all these students can ride and take advantage of multiple opportunities at Greenville Tech. We do not have electricity currently in the Career Center, and the Career Centers that these 3 high schools are zoned to do not have access to HVAC. And also our welding programs, we have waiting lists. So this will allow us to serve more students in welding. Mhm. Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Good. Thank you, Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. Ms. Morton Fair.
Thank you. Thank you for this this presentation. Can you tell me the criteria for dual enrollment? Because that was the #1 reason that students left.
So there are several. They have to have, they can have multiple merit measures, which is grade point average and certain grades in their English and math classes and teacher recommendations. They also can have a qualifying test score in which, so there are multiple ways that you can qualify for dual enrollment. I will say over the years, Greenville Early College has really increased that students that are able to take dual enrollment. That's something that they really made a goal, and they've done a great job of, but still not all students have qualified.
Okay, my second question is, I love this template of how you recruited the additional students, and the numbers are fantastic. Were we not doing that before now?
We were doing that. We were going into the middle schools of the zoned areas. Because we're moving it in those 3 high schools, they have more feeder schools to recruit from. Also, many times students didn't want to come to the early college because they wanted to stay at their home school. They want dual enrollment opportunities, but they didn't want to leave their home school because of the opportunities they had in athletics and in band and chorus that weren't available at Greenville Early College.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morton Fair. Ms. Mosley?
Thank you so much, Dr. Stiles, and thank you, Ms. Dean, for this presentation. My question, a couple of them, piggybacking off of what Ms. Morton Fair asked. So I love the fact that there's a 300% increase, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly. I thought I heard you say interest, is that, or is that enrollment? I'm trying to understand if there's a difference between the percent that's interested in it, because you can show interest in something and ultimately decide not to enroll, or what we're actually seeing in enrollment numbers.
Right. They're seeing these enrollment numbers. When I got this information 2 weeks ago, this was interest, but they've all had their parent meeting, they've all had their tours, and they feel fairly confident that these are the enrollment numbers.
Okay, so are we in a position, so from a staffing standpoint in these schools, to keep the class sizes small and the commitments that we've made, are we, and it sounds like put them geographically within the school in a certain area, we can do that? Like,
yes.
We are prepared to make
We
that
are prepared
transition,
to
even
do
with
that.
this increase in numbers?
Right, and that's why they got 2 positions above baseline to make sure that we could keep those class sizes small.
Okay, and so I really love the transportation aspect to Greenville Tech. So if I'm understanding you correctly, if there is a dual enrollment opportunity, or maybe a trade opportunity that we can't offer in our schools, we can provide transportation for that student to the school.
From those 3 schools, yes, to Greenville Tech campus, yes.
Okay, are we going to, do you envision, and maybe it's too soon to ask this question, offer that opportunity at potentially other schools to not only lessen the burden, because I do know that our career centers have a waiting list at several locations for different programs, not all, but for different programs. And then for any other student that might want access to a dual enrollment credit that they can't get. And I'm asking that question for a reason, because my own daughter took advantage of being able to go to Greenville Tech and take classes this semester to finish out her high school career. And transportation is not an issue for us. So I appreciate that we are offering that for these students. I do feel like it has been a wonderful transition for her as she approaches graduation and going into college. And she has actually said to me, it has really made a difference sitting in classroom with students who want to be there. And I know that's an observation, but it's just a different vibe than going to the high school. So I guess I'm wondering, if we have students at other schools, do you ever see that's, I mean, outside of necessarily these 3 target schools,
the transportation is a grant that Greenville Technical College received specifically for serving students in these 3 schools. So Greenville County will not be paying for that transportation cost. Greenville Technical College came to Mr. Williams and worked that out, and we're able to put any student on that bus that is interested in dual enrollment that needs transportation. So that was a combined effort with Greenville Tech and Greenville County Schools.
So if it's a grant, it's something that would have to be renewed each year? Okay.
It's something that they've
Does
got.
Greenville Tech have the capacity to expand that if we had, because I am confident there are students at other schools that may not have, that may have transportation issues where,
Yeah.
and I think it's great we're focusing on these 3 schools, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I can't speak for Greenville Tech. I mean,
Okay.
that's something we will always pursue. I
Okay.
feel confident, but I can't speak for if they're wanting to expand that.
Okay.
I
just
will
didn't-
say, Ms. Mosley, we have had schools prior to this, when they had a larger cohort, particularly
Right.
in courses they couldn't offer, the school worked out transportation, because they have activity buses and
Okay.
things. So we've had schools in the past that have provided, now not for one kid, but when we've had a cohort of kids, they have provided
Well, I
transportation.
just know that transportation is a limitation for several,
It
and I
is,
do,
correct.
again, I am very grateful that we're focused, we have the focus on these 3 schools, but I would argue that there might be a need at others as well, so that's good to know. Okay, and then, hold on, let me make sure that's everything. I think that's it. I just wanted to comment on, I'm really grateful that we're offering the opportunity to go and look at some of the trades that they can't necessarily access at our career centers, whether it's because of waiting list or because of the classes aren't offered. I hope that this might even become an even bigger solution to some of our I just know waiting lists are bad at some of our career centers, so, I'm just kind of hopeful that this is going to translate into that. So maybe the district can, once this runs for a couple of years, evaluate whether there's other ways to lessen some of the wait list at our career center. So, all right, that's all I had. Thank you.
As a follow-up to
Yeah.
your question, Eric might can speak more specifically to this. We're working with Greenville Tech right now on securing another grant directly aimed at this, the underserved population, because they have it's one of their goals
Right.
to expand to their underserved populations, both for technical and or college transfer. So we're working on that with them. We are looking at some options of some facility expansion that we might do in conjunction with them, because we got this intersection of challenges related to the fact that we're now producing all these certifications.
Right.
We're running out of place, but that's not maybe the biggest challenge. We don't have enough teachers. It's not a matter of, putting in the budget and adding teachers for it. It's the actual locating teachers to teach those classes, because as you can imagine, they're in extremely high demand to be employed for the skills that we try to employ them for to teach to other students. So that's a challenge. So we tried to work as close as we can with tech to address that challenge, to address the challenge of space. We also have the challenge of transportation. Cost is a factor in that, but the bigger factor in it, Adam's not in here this morning, but is lack of enough drivers. And, that's less of a problem during the day, but we're always also running a whole lot of midday routes already between work transportation and regular career center transportation and fine arts center transportation and all. So it's this complex web of facility, teaching personnel, getting students to the courses, that we're trying to work through all that and trying to do that in partnership, not just with Greenville Tech, but with some foundations and some grant awarding foundations in the community and outside the community. So I guess a good problem to have, but it's still a problem.
I get it, and I commend the district for trying to work with the tech and partner with tech and leverage those resources, because like you said, we may not have them all, but it might be a great partnership. And I've had a student who's gone to the Career Center. I've had a student who's now taking dual credit classes, so I've lived it in a real way of how valuable it is, and I do think, I know you need to extend time, I do think, I'm just grateful that we're doing it, so thank you.
Without exception, we'll extend for 5 minutes. Thank you for that question, Ms. Mosley, and thank you, Dr. Royster, for sharing that information.
Jerry, did you need to add anything to what I had said?
The only part I would add is that we will, those programs will be available for students if they can provide their own transportation. So there'll be some sort of triaging for our students to see, okay, is there a way, or there's some carpooling that you could do with a student from your location that's going over. At this point, just the 3 locations that we can make that transportation available. But we are trying to work with Greenville Tech sort of in phase 2 of this new dual enrollment expansion to figure that out for more students, specifically those that we either do not or cannot offer at our centers, or we have significant wait lists for.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mrs. Middleton is with us online, and she, I believe, has texted a question to Ms. Fitzer. No, so, okay. All right, thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to our 4th matter of business, which is administration. Our first administrative item is 4.01, the 2024 through the 2029 Strategic Education Plan. Dr. Royster, I'm going to turn this item over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. And just simply as a little background, you all are very familiar with this presentation. You've seen it in workshop format now, I believe, 3 times. And we have Ms. Brinkman with us today, who has done an excellent job coordinating the strategic plan process for us. And she's going to share in brief an overview that hopefully will not be too repetitious, again, since you have seen all this before, but so that it's part of certainly the public record. And if you have questions that have occurred to you since seeing it the last time, you can answer those questions. This was a massive undertaking, as it is for any school district that goes through the reaccreditation process, but it is made so much so by the size and scope of our district, the number of people involved in it, and there was tremendous involvement. And I know Terry will share with you some of those numbers as a reminder. And she will now go through that presentation, and we very much appreciate her work on this, Susan Clark's support of that work. And then a lot of people in this room and not in this room that have served as resources for the compilation of the data necessary to bring this plan forward. And as a reminder, we are required by both accreditation standard, but more importantly by the state of South Carolina, to have a strategic plan in place. There are certain things that must be in it in order to follow the template established by the state. I think ideally, if we were structuring a strategic plan, it would not be near this long, be able to write it on 1 page, on a piece of paper, because that's the easiest to focus on. So this goes in far greater detail than I think most people would say a strategic plan ought to be, but it is in order to meet those requirements. Shortly behind this, the next item on your agenda is actually to approve the school strategic plans that were developed by the schools pursuant to the district strategic plan, which is the way the process is delineated in statute and regulation to work. Ms. Brinkman?
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Well, good morning again. We've seen each other quite a bit. About 14 months ago, in March of 2023, I stood up here and laid out a process for developing a strategic plan that was really focused on being reflective of our community's values and beliefs and what their expectations were for our education system. And when we talked about that, one of the things we talked about was the fact that a good strategic plan, a high-quality plan, looks at 3 things. It says, where are we now? What are our strengths and weaknesses? Where are we going to go? Where do we want to go? And then how will we get there? And the how will we get there is the actual plan itself. And it includes measurable goals, research-based strategies, systematic action items, and of course, accountability, because we want to make absolutely sure that we know who's responsible for all the items in the plan. As Dr. Royster just mentioned, it's fairly large and unwieldy, although I'm happy to say that this one is significantly shorter than the ones we've done in the past, and that was one of our goals. You were with me every step of the way, so this will all be familiar to you, but I do, for the record, want to go through some of the timeline. As I said, we presented to the board in March of 2023, and the very next month, we did some community forums. We did 5 on-site, 5 different geographic locations throughout the district, and we did 1 virtually. And we took the conversations that we had at those community forums and we built a survey specific to the Greenville County Schools strategic planning process. So really at the end of April through May and the end of school, we then administered those surveys and we had really good response, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Over the summer, Susan and I spent a lot of time analyzing not only those surveys, but the State Department of Education's Climate and Culture Survey. We looked at test scores. We tried to pull them all together in a way that was pretty easily understandable. Had a lot of help, of course, from Dr. Jason McCreary's office, who does such a great job breaking all this down. And we shared that with you, the board, in a workshop in August. And part of the reason that was to let you see what the survey said and what some of our achievement data said, and then also to give you an idea of how we would go about discussing this with the stakeholders. Each of you was able to appoint a representative to the stakeholder team. And in September of last year, we spent 2 very intensive days at MT Anderson going through all of this information and asking those stakeholders from our community to say, we see where we are now. You have an idea of that. Where do you want to go? And what do you think our priorities should be? Like, what do you think we need to focus on? In October, you guys had a test workshop, a test score workshop, which again helped you recognize where we are, where our strengths and weaknesses are. And then moving on, in November, we brought to you the results of the strategic plan stakeholder team work, where we said, here's what they said the changes should be to our framework, here's where they believe our priorities should be. And then we worked with you to determine the performance goals around which our plan will be built. During the next few months, November to February, our action teams worked on those strategies and action items, and then we presented you with the draft plan in February. And as you are supposed to do as a board, you took that very seriously and you looked at it, and we came back in April with some revisions to the plan based on your feedback. We made a report out to our stakeholders in April. We actually made a report to the principals the first Wednesday of this month, which I believe was May 1st. And then here we are 14 months later with a lot of work in our rearview mirror and a plan that I think we can all be proud of. So let's just get right into it. What did our stakeholders say and what did we find from that? So the stakeholder team composition, first of all, as I said, you each were able to appoint a board member, appoint a representative from your area. We wanted to make absolutely sure that we had a really broad perspective from across our district. So we had representatives from parents through our PTA and SICs. We had student representatives from our Inter-High Council. We had representatives from local municipalities, chambers of commerce, business and industry, nonprofits, our partners such as public education partners, law enforcement, United Way, the Greenville Federal Credit Union, Prisma, Greenville Mental Health. We had representatives from higher education. Of course, we had principals, teachers, and district staff. So we had a lot of brain power in the room, and they took their job very, very seriously. And I can say that for 2 days, they really, really kept their nose to the grindstone and were very focused. And it was a thrilling couple of days. Maybe they wouldn't describe it that way, but it was thrilling for those of us who were really looking for good, usable feedback. So those stakeholders were asked to collaborate and identify our community's values, beliefs, and expectations as they relate to education. They were also asked to determine where are we now and to recommend to the board where we want to go. So let's start with the framework. The framework is a part of the plan required by the state, and it includes the vision, which should be descriptive of our ideal outcome, the mission, which is how we will work to achieve that outcome, and then our belief statements. Those are the fundamental values that we think are so important to our community that we would never, ever ignore those, turn our backs on those, or anything like that in order to achieve what we want to achieve. And I'm happy to say that our community's fundamental values very much are student-centered. So then we looked at the data study. We looked at the state of the district survey results, test data, achievement data, and then we ask them to identify and recommend priorities. So let's start with the vision statement. So previously, our vision statement was not very different from this one. It said students inspired, supported, and prepared for their next opportunities in life, education, and employment. As I said, this is our ideal vision, so we wanted to make sure that all of our students felt this way. And the first thing that our stakeholders said is, well, if you want it to be all, you need to add the word all. You need to make sure it says that. The second thing they said is your vision statement really needs to be succinct, needs to be easy to remember. So they wanted to change the ending. Instead of saying next opportunities in life, education, and employment, they wanted to shorten that and just say maximum potential, because that's what we want. We recognize that every student has a different level of potential, but they all have a maximum potential, and we want to make sure that they're able to achieve that. So the recommended vision statement coming from the stakeholders and reviewed by you and other people is all students inspired, supported, and prepared to reach their maximum potential. And if we can achieve that, we will be doing very, very well. Then we talked about the mission statement. The last mission statement had a lot of language in it that came from the South Carolina Profile of the Graduate. And it's a really great document, but it has some wording that they felt was awkward because it talks about let me see if I can find it. It talks about world class. And so the previous mission statement said, we build college and career-ready graduates by connecting students to engaging classes and meaningful experiences that cultivate world-class knowledge and skills while developing character, leadership, and citizenship. So again, the stakeholders made some recommended changes, which you have also looked at in your workshops, and it says we cultivate relationships. They felt it was really important that we get that word relationships in there because education is so much about relationships. We cultivate relationships with all students in order to connect them to engaging classes and meaningful experiences that build essential knowledge and skills while developing characteristics that contribute to positive participation in a civil society. They said, we really want people to understand that what we're trying to do is build our future leaders. We're trying to develop students in a way that when it's their turn to take over and it's their turn to lead our community, that they will be equipped to do that. I'm not going to read through all of our belief statements. There are 10 of them. I'm happy to say that they explain our non-negotiables, as I said, our expectations for our organization and employees, the expected culture of our system, and the expected outcome. So one of the ones that I think is particularly important is kind of the last one, which is in a way summative. And it says, our educational organization prepares students to value learning and contribute to society, which has a lasting positive impact on our communities. And to me, this really ties together the importance of public education to the health and quality of life of the community. Next, as I mentioned, the stakeholders reviewed all of these items. They looked at, Dr. Royster presented his state of the district, which you've heard multiple times. They looked at those survey results. As I said, we had good participation. We had over 20,000 responses to our strategic planning surveys. We have had over 50,000 responses to the State Department of Ed Climate and Culture Survey, which is administered in our schools every single year. They looked at teacher retention data, attendance and achievement data by subgroup, and by that we mean things like graduation rate. And then they looked at our actual test results by subgroup, the same type of information you saw in that workshop you did in, I think, November. And so here were their findings. They said, you know, here's some areas we've done really, really well in. We've done really great on our Graduation Plus indicators. We've done a really good job of helping our students understand that nowadays you need more than just a high school diploma to be able to be successful, to support yourself and a family. And so you guys had 75% of your graduates graduate last year with a Graduation Plus certificate, which means they either had college credits or they had an industry certification or both. They said your graduation rate improvement has been absolutely impressive, and we want to applaud you for that. They recognize that we've done a really good job recovering from COVID disruptions, much better than maybe the trend is nationwide. And they said safety and security is clearly a priority for Greenville County Schools, and you've been very proactive in those areas. The opportunities for improvement, these first two are tied together, and they very much came from the survey data. Student behavior and engagement buy-in by disruptive students. This is something that was mentioned in almost all of our survey groups. Our teachers talked about it, our non-teaching employees talked about it, parents talked about it, and even students talked about it. They said, yes, we have students who are sometimes just so continually disruptive, it makes it hard for us to learn. They said another opportunity for improvement is just supports for struggling students. And they said, we don't just mean academic supports. We recognize that students really can't focus on academics if they're having a lot of other really serious issues. And so they said, you need to make sure that you build in these supports for students who have a really difficult home life, who maybe their home life is unstable. Perhaps is a student who's moved 6 or 7 times in a single school year. There needs to be some extra support for that student and a recognition that there's been a lot of disruption. And then lastly, they said your subgroup participation overall and particularly in advanced classes. So those are the areas they said were opportunities for improvement. And they said, but we want you to know that we recognize that you have some real challenges to make this progress. And they talked about the growing mental health and anxiety problem among everyone in our country, but particularly teens, chronic absenteeism, which we'll talk about in just a minute, the increasing and changing multilingual population in Greenville County schools. Not only is it growing, but we are seeing more and more students who come to us who not only do not speak English, but they have perhaps never been in a formal education setting before, and that makes it much more challenging. Then we have the challenge of really knowing what is your appropriate rigor for students with disabilities and pupils in poverty. One of the things we looked at, and you'll see in just a minute when we talk about our goals under Goal Area 1, is that sometimes pupils in poverty don't test as well, and they don't get into some of these advanced classes and gifted learning, but yet we know they have that ability. But because of the deficits in their early childhood, they sometimes don't test into those. We have a growing number of pupils in poverty, and research will show you that there are a lot of challenges that those students face that hamper their academics. And then teacher recruitment and retention. There are fewer and fewer people going into education programs in college, and we recognize that that makes it harder to get really high quality teachers. And of course, keeping teachers is hard because it's hard to teach, and anyone who's been in a classroom knows that. And then parent and family engagement and support is something else that has really taken a nosedive since COVID. No one's really sure why, though there's lots of theories, of course. But we know that students really do best when everyone works in partnership and tries to pull together to make sure that students achieve their maximum potential. So let's talk about the identified priorities. We asked these stakeholders after they went through all this learning and they figured out where we are and where we want to go and what our values are. What is it that you think we need to really focus on in this, our new strategic plan? And they worked in groups and we got about 12 to 15 answers. But when we sat down afterwards and really went through those, they fell very neatly into these 3 categories. The first thing they said is you need to have a culture of high expectations for all students, and we try to have that already, but what they recognize is that sometimes, because teachers and administrators are human, they look at students who are in very difficult situations or who have severe learning disabilities, and they don't want to make their lives any harder. And what they said to us is you need to make absolutely sure that everyone is reaching their maximum potential, everyone is being challenged, everyone is being stretched, no matter where they may fall into the continuum of their current abilities. We need to make sure we recruit, retain, and develop high quality teachers. And they specifically said to focus on teachers, and here was their reasoning. Administrators are pulled from the teacher pool. Every administrator over there who works in any kind of academic area started out in a classroom. And so they said, if you recruit and develop really high quality teachers, then you're going to be fine when you start moving them into the administrative world. And then lastly, they talked a lot about relationships, and they talked about building positive relationships between and among students, teachers, families, and school personnel. And one of the things that they postulated anyway was that when we look at some of these discipline issues, is that so often those might be helped by these relationships, and that by helping the student discipline issues, then you might simultaneously be helping teachers have more job satisfaction and help with the teacher recruitment and retention issues as well. So we've identified our priorities, we've worked on our framework, and now it came time to build the actual plan. So the state of South Carolina requires every strategic plan to have 3 components. And those 3 components need to be built around learning, your workforce, and then your environment. In Greenville County Schools, we chose to name those 3 areas and to give each one a guiding statement to help us. So we named our Goal Area 1 Student Success, and our guiding statement is that we will deliver high quality curriculum, instruction, and interventions that meet the needs of each student. Under our HR goal, we called it Premier Workforce, and we will recruit, retain, and develop exemplary personnel in all positions. And then the caring culture and environment, we will provide a safe and healthy environment that promotes learning and respectful relationships. So, the South Carolina structure for a strategic plan begins with an executive summary of needs assessment, and Dr. McCrary's office provides that for us, and it's about 60 pages in ours. It has lots and lots of charts and graphs, lots of explanation of our subgroups, lots of explanation of all of our standardized testing and other achievement data. They do a really fabulous job on that. Then they ask us for our framework. Before they even get into the plan, they want to really understand what our goals are, what our ultimate vision is, and how we're going to get there. And then we have something called performance goals and goal areas. We have those 3 goal areas we just talked about, and under each one, we have a SMART goal, at least one. We happen to have 5, 3, and 3. And a SMART goal, as you probably know, is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And then under each of those goals, you develop strategies and action items. So the goal area 1 team that identified the strategies and action items for each goal under student success was led by Jeff McCoy. The goal area 2 team, which focused on a premier workforce, was led by Morgan Clements. And goal area 3, caring culture and environment, took 2 people. It was Karen Kapp and Philip Davey who handled that one. So, because you have seen this so many times and you have had this document with all of the details in your possession for about 2 months, maybe a little bit more, we're just going to talk about the goals broadly. If we got into every action item, I'd be up here all day, and nobody wants that, I know. So let's talk about goal area 1. Again, this is student success. We've got 5 goals. This has always been considered our core goal in Greenville County Schools, and we've always said our other goal areas work in support of this. So we had 5 goals under this, as I mentioned. The first 2 goals focus on math achievement and English achievement. And even though these measurable outcomes occur at the high school level, there are strategies and action items that go all the way back to preschool. So when you look at this, don't think that this is just a strategic plan for high school. It's not. We make sure that people achieve at the high school level because they have the core foundation that they're going to need to be able to understand more difficult concepts. The third goal is one that's built around Graduation Plus. Our community is very supportive of Graduation Plus. They understand it, they recognize the need for it, and so our goal in goal area 3 is to move the percentage of graduates who finish Greenville County Schools with a G+ certification from 75% to 95%. That's a big goal. The last 2 goals are both goals built around giftedness, and those are required by the state. You have to have one at the elementary level and one at the secondary level. And our elementary one is really about improving the performance among students who are already identified as gifted. But there are strategies in there to help hopefully more students get what they need to fall into the gifted category when we do the testing that puts you in that category. And then the second one is really us opening up dual credit to pupils in poverty. Right now we have very few pupils in poverty who participate in our dual credit courses, and we have many more who could be successful in there, so we're going to make a targeted effort to increase that. Goal area 2, the premier workforce. These are really very straightforward. The first one is all about getting high quality teachers and making sure that we have the right teachers. It's really funny, when I came to the school district, I just thought, every year teachers showed up at a school and it just worked out great. I had no idea how much work went into knowing exactly how many teachers you need, what areas of certification you need them in, how special education classes, self-contained, might be distributed throughout the district. So it was quite a learning curve for me. So our goal, first one, is just to make sure in this shrinking teacher pool that we have what we need for our students to be successful. The second one is about retaining those teachers and really developing them as well. And the third one is just about retaining those non-teaching classified and hourly positions throughout the district. Goal area 3, our caring culture and environment. These goals are a little bit, maybe need a little bit more of an explanation. So it also has 3 performance goals. The first goal is in response to concerns we have seen and heard about student behavior. We talked about this earlier. To put it in perspective, about 80% of our students do not get a referral in a given year. So when you hear all this about student behavior, just think about that. 80%, a significant majority, never get in any kind of trouble. Of the 20% that do get in trouble, about 60% of them get at least a secondary referral. So what we are trying to do with this first goal, which says decrease by 10 points the percentage of students receiving more than one incident referral in a single school year, is once a student gets a referral, and so that we know that they have fallen into that 20% category, we want to try to help them not get another referral. And I'm going to read this because I want this to be very clear. We have developed strategies and action items to ensure behavior expectations and consequences that are clearly communicated and understood, as well as guidance that will help students control their emotions and recognize boundaries. We want to be sure this goal is achieved by improving behavior and not by lowering expectations for student behavior or not reporting bad behavior. So I want to make that clear. So our goal here is to really help those students who kind of consistently misbehave learn how to manage their behavior, learn what their expectations are and the consequences before it happens. The second goal is to reduce by 10 percentage points the students who are chronically absent. Since the COVID shutdown, the percentage of students who miss 10% or more of the days they were enrolled stands at 24%. That's almost 1 in 4. Prior to COVID, that number was around 14%. And this goal returns us to that pre-COVID number. Now, obviously, we would not mind doing even better than that. But we know that chronic absenteeism has really serious consequences for students. They fall behind, they get confused, they're not sure what's going on in class, they're more likely to act out. And they also have a harder time kind of connecting with the school and being involved and in leadership positions and learning some of those characteristics we talked about earlier. So we want to reduce chronic absenteeism by 10 points. Lastly, we want to increase by 10 percentage points a composite measure of parent-guardian engagement. I mentioned earlier that we know that it's really important that schools partner with parents and guardians in order to help students kind of have surrounding supports. And this is another number that we have seen decline since COVID. I know I keep bringing that up, but it was a major shift in education, as you know. And so we are trying to use a lot of different strategies and methods to get parents back engaged in the school, not just, working the concession stand at football games, but really partnering with teachers and administrators on both student behavior and student achievement. So, 14 months ago, I stood before you and I said, a good strategic plan has some of these characteristics. It encourages broad input. It helps keep the main thing. It's a playbook focused on changing outcomes. It ensures our focus is on continuous improvement. It fosters transparency, builds unity, helps align the efforts of teachers, principals, staff, and board, and most importantly, it benefits students. I am happy to say that 14 months later, thanks to your hard work, the hard work of our stakeholders, and really everyone pulling together, I think that's the plan we're presenting to you. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brickman, for that outstanding review of our strategic plan. We're very proud of that. And also, thank you for your leadership. We really appreciate that as well. Ms. Leventis-Wells, do you have a question?
And I just have, first of all, fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. I do have one question on this last goal. Goal 3, the behavior. Could you just touch one more time on that? Because I know we want to decrease it by 10%. And, a student having one referral in a single school year. Just read that to me one more time because something just clicked in there. I just have some concerns that when there is a behavioral problem, we're just not going to minimize it and just send them back to the classroom just because we want this percentage to stay within the 10%, because we know that in today's world, there are more behavioral issues, whether it's mental health, whatever the situation is, it's just bad behavior and conflict or whatever are showing out. But I want to make sure that we're just not going to look at this 10%, meet this goal and make sure nothing happens.
Okay.
Okay?
So again, what we have found in our research is that 80% of our students don't misbehave. So we're talking about 20%. And of those 20%, 40% of them mess up one time, and that's it, right? So you're looking at 60% of 20%, and Jeff McCoy and I don't do public math, so we're not going to figure out what that is. But anyway, a small percentage of our students who really get multiple referrals in a year. And those are the students we want to focus on, because we know teenagers and young people, their brains are developing, they're figuring out boundaries, they're learning, they're going to mess up one time, right? That's going to happen. What we are trying to address are these students who continually disrupt class, who continually make bad decisions, who continually push boundaries and cross them. And so one of the things that we know that is most important, and Dr. Royster can talk about this a little bit because he was principal of a high school where they really made a significant improvement in student behavior, is making sure that every student understands what the expectations are. Because sometimes an expectations in a student's home is very different than an expectation in a classroom. They need to understand expectations. They need to understand consequences. They need to understand how they can control their emotions and responses to things they don't like. And so really our strategies and action items all focus on that. They focus on making sure everybody knows what the expectations are, making sure that they recognize that. And I don't just mean students. We also want to make sure that if a student behaves a certain way in a class over here, if they behave that way in a class over here, it's treated the same, right? Because it's really difficult enough for anyone to know how to behave. But when it's different, every time you walk into a classroom, and in here I can push back and in here I can't. So we're going to try to make sure that we communicate very well these expectations. The other things, and we can ask Karen Kapp to come up here and speak on this if we need her to, is that we're going to make sure that we have plans and strategies for working with those students who do some of these things that we see repeated, such as disrupting, disrespect. We're going to go in and talk to them and have actual plans for them to see, this is where you crossed the line. This is what you said that was completely unacceptable. This is a better way to handle it if you're frustrated or angry. This is some of the ways that you can maybe make that known without it falling into something that results in a referral. So we have made that clear. We talked about the principles with that on May 1st, and the fact that we are not asking you to not report. We are not asking you to sweep this under the rug. We absolutely want to address this and lower the incidence of behavior problems.
Yes, thank you. You answered my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Leventis Wells. Do we have additional questions? Okay, Ms. Doolin?
Thank you. In reviewing this again,
Okay.
I noticed there's, it's not in this part of the presentation, but in the actual plan,
Okay.
there's persons responsible for each individual sub-goal. Surely that single person isn't the only person that will be responsible. So does the person that's assigned as the person responsible coordinate with other?
I would call that is where the buck stops. Like the person may delegate much of that. And in a lot of situations, for example, every principal may be responsible for a portion of it, but ultimately the person at the district level who is responsible to make sure that the principals handle it is the person who's listed in the plan. So yes, just because there's one person listed does not mean that's the only person who will work on it. That is the person who ultimately we will go to when it's time to update the plan in a year and say, okay, tell us what's been done, tell us the kind of progress we've made, show us the evidence.
I noticed that special education was left out of every single, is not listed as being responsible for anything.
Here?
And so I feel like it's really important for the person who is responsible to coordinate.
I think Ms. Hogan would like to speak to that.
So I think you're speaking to who's responsible for special education, and while that is absolutely my title, and I am certainly responsible for programming and planning for students with disabilities, it is the responsibility of every educator. And in general education, that's why on the leadership piece of it, you would see my supervisor. Does that make sense?
I just noticed that your department had been omitted from being responsible for anything on here, and I feel
Well,
like your
I
department
assure you
is
we are not
extremely
omitted. I
important.
assure you we are not omitted from the responsibility, but it is a very strategic point that it is not sole ownership of the special education department. It is shared ownership by everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Doolin. Last call for questions. Okay, hearing none, we have a recommended motion from administration to approve the 2024 through 2029 GCS strategic plan as presented. I need a maker of the motion.
Madam Chairman, I move to accept the administration's motion as presented.
Mr. Sailors has made a motion. I need a second. Dr. Presley has made a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our second administrative item is 4.02, our school strategic education plans. Dr. Royster, I'm going to ask you to speak to this item.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. In summary, as a part of the strategic planning process, every school is required to develop their own strategic plan that in essence is a smaller in scope version of the district strategic plan. So the areas of focus would be the same for the school. How they might choose to approach some of those areas will differ from school to school, community to community, and they go through a miniature version of the process that Terry described to you for the district. They go through that at the school level to get input localized to their community in order to customize their strategic plan to fall within the parameters of the district strategic plan, but again, tailored to their community. And copies of every one of those is attached in board docs for your review. But this is a requirement that from the state regarding strategic planning, that the board not only approve the district's plan, but approve all the plans of all the schools within the district. Like many other things, it's perhaps written towards the idea of the average size school district in the state, as opposed to districts that have 50, 60, 70, or in our case, nearly 100 schools.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Royster. We have a recommended motion from the administration to approve the school's strategic education plan as presented. I need a maker of the motion.
Madam Chairman, I move to accept the administration's recommendation.
Mr. Sailors has made a motion. I need a second. Ms. Goodwin Caldwell has made a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our third administrative item is 4.03, naming of the new elementary school at 61 Isabel Lane. Dr. Royster, would you like to speak to this item?
Ma'am, I'd just turn that over to the chair of the ad hoc committee, Dr. Presley.
Dr. Presley, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. I want to start with some thank yous. First, I'd like to thank the committee members, Ms. Goodwin Caldwell, Ms. Levinas Wells, and Ms. Morrison Fair, who served on the ad hoc committee to determine the name. Also, our district personnel, Dr. Ward, who assisted us, Nancy Fitzer, with our data, and of course, our communications department, as well as Dr. Royster, who has provided us with input and guidance and served as a great thought partner. Also, we like to thank the hundreds of stakeholders who submitted suggestions. Those totaled 1,375 in the spreadsheet that we reviewed. Our work began on January 19th as our committee members were selected and a timeline was developed. Public input was collected from March 1st through April 1st. Our committee of four met to narrow suggestions on April 23rd and again on May 7th to determine a final recommendation. One of the concepts or ideas that came up basically in every conversation has to do with the environmental science focus of this new elementary school, and that was instrumental in our final recommendation. Within the recommendations, we saw numerous suggestions for Reedy Elementary, Laurel Elementary, and suggestions for a combination of the two, Reedy Laurel Elementary, Laurel Reedy Elementary. And as I shared, it's a new elementary school sits in between the Reedy River, or will sit once it's constructed, in between the Reedy River and Laurel Creek. The committee recommends to the board that the name of the school be Reedy Laurel Elementary School. And I will quote Ms. Morrison Fair, who put it so beautifully. She talked about the history and she talked about the importance of the rivers and the creeks. And she said, and they were there before anything. They were there before people and buildings. And so the committee felt like this was a really great way to honor the environmental science focus, the history of the area, and two very important bodies of water that inform a lot in that area. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Presley, and thank you for your leadership on the ad hoc committee, and thank you to each and every ad hoc committee member that was named. We certainly appreciate your work. We have a recommended motion from the ad hoc committee for the new elementary school naming to name the new elementary school at 61 Isbell Lane, Reedy Laurel Elementary School. This motion does not require a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. The new school will be named Reedy Laurel Elementary School. Our fourth administrative item is 4.04, video live streaming of school board meetings. This item was brought to us by Mrs. Doolin. Dr. Royster, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. As some background, for a number of years, the district has live streamed the audio of school board meetings. We have not video live streamed it. There was legislation pending in the General Assembly to require school districts, I don't believe it required any other subdivision of the state, nor the state itself, nor its agencies, nor its boards or commissions, nor the General Assembly to live stream, but it did single out school districts to live stream. I believe that legislation is now dead for this legislative session, which would mean that all legislation in South Carolina, as you all know, operates on a 2-year cycle. If something does not pass by the second year of the 2-year cycle, it starts over. Now, I would feel certain that will start over next winter in January when the new General Assembly takes seat in Columbia and begins a review of that process again. Well, like many other things, if you all were to decide to do this, there are multiple ways that it can be done. And there would also be some other decisions that you all would need to make. One, is this something you desire to do? Secondly, if you desire to do it, to what meetings would it apply? Regular board meetings, committees of the whole, standing committees such as advocacy, ad hoc committees, workshops, or other gatherings of the board that are not generally places where the board takes action, many of which are located outside of this room. For example, your executive sessions, which would not be subject to any live, either audio or video streaming by the nature of the statutory construct of executive sessions. But workshops and other less formal gatherings of the board where we're generally providing information only often occur outside this room. Long-range facility plan being one, the first budget workshop being another. So which meetings would it apply to if you all decide to do that? And then, as with any other technology, there are multiple approaches to initiating video recording. The most simple approach would be to utilize the existing video capacity in the boardroom. If you look right there, there's a camera. You all probably noticed it before. There's also one back here. Their installed video is for two purposes. One was security. That one installed after this one. This one's been here for a number of years. One of the primary reasons the rear camera was installed, the one back here, was not only for security purposes in the room, but equal to that, the ability to transmit the board meeting to TVs in the upper and lower lobby should this room be over capacity. You all may or may not be aware that happens, but if the room's over capacity, the feed is transmitted to those TVs, so you can still stand in the lobby and see and hear what goes on in the boardroom, up or down in the lobby. So you could utilize this camera because it is focused on the desk, and it will tie to the existing audio stream. Now, that requires no other personnel. There's always somebody sitting back there. There's at least two back there. There might be three because I can't see because of the chair. I can see Dennis right there. So we've got at least two back there. There's always somebody back there managing the system, making sure that the recording is occurring, making sure the PA system is working. So Dennis Whitehead, who handles all the technical aspects of our security and alarm systems, was able to tie that security camera to the existing audio feed. That is a cost-neutral solution. The camera's already there. The technology is already there. It simply required him to be able to patch that technology together to produce both an audio and video simultaneously linked signal. So it does not. Have you ever seen a movie or a TV show that's out of sync? A person's mouth's moving, but the words don't align with it. This is in sync. It does not require any additional personnel to operate. Now, a more elaborate system would require people to operate it in addition to the people here. If there was a desire to zoom in on the person that's speaking, to switch from one camera to another, to switch from looking at the audience to looking at the staff to looking at the board members, all of that would require people beyond what we already have assigned to that task. So we have a video clip that we'll display in just a minute. Now you can tell it's been cut and pasted because you don't want to see the whole hour's worth, probably. We took the district leadership team meeting from last Monday. We held it in this room. Now, we do not wish to be responsible for how any of you may have been portrayed by the actors that are sitting in your place. Now, I portrayed myself in this depiction, but the rest of you were portrayed by someone else. So if you have some critique of how they did that, share that with them later on. But we took clips of this so you could really see how well can you see the people? Can you hear what is being said? Can you see the presentation? Now, Dennis was able to take the screen, the big screen. So you see the Greenville Early College Transition Update. So you can follow the PowerPoint. It can be at the bottom right. It can be center bottom. It can be bottom left. Now, it is harder to see on this screen. It is much easier to see, and it's pretty distinct if you look at this on your laptop or you look at it on an iPad or a phone. Across the top are your names and mine, starting with Mrs. LaVentus Wells and working around this way in order. So as you see Brian Skipper sitting there, Mrs. LaVentus Wells' name appears above Dr. Skipper. Now, again, it's hard to see on this, but when you're looking at it up close, you can see that. So you can tell who the people are, who's speaking. You can hear more clearly than you can actually hear the audio feed by itself. You can hear the audio, and you can see what is displayed on the screen. Now, we do not have the ability to shift, again, back and forth between putting what's up on the screen, shifting to look directly at, in this case, Ms. Dean presenting, then zooming in on Dr. Skipper in this picture, or Ms. Hogan, or somebody else is sitting up here. We don't have the ability to do that. That would require additional technology and people. All right, so here is the 2-minute simulation to give you an idea of what this looks like and sounds like. Dennis? Well, at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Dean to share with you the information, the specifics about the relocated program. Ms. Dean?
Hey, thank you. Thank you for letting me share about what has happened in the last few months with our Greenville Early College relocation currently.
Tara, are we considering any change in assignment spots if there are high school students from other high schools that may be interested in attending one of these 3 schools because of this program?
We are, those students that were enrolled in Greenville Early College currently, we are allowing them to a change in assignment if they would like to go to Southside, Berea, or Carolina. We have at this point not discussed other students enrolling from other schools.
I think at this point for this year, assuming those schools remain open to choice, and I believe all 3 of them are currently open to choice, they'd have the option to request change in assignment. Obviously, have to provide their own transportation, though.
Ms. Dean, one comment and then just a suggestion. I think the comment is we did this same model with career and tech education several years ago, and when we pushed those courses back into the high school, and we saw significant growth. So I absolutely think it's the right decision. I think one of the factors is that those CTE programs that are available will also be offering the opportunity for students in welding. We have traditionally huge wait lists for welding, and so that transportation will provide students who were not able to get into one of the career centers in welding an opportunity to go to Greenville Tech. It may be important to point out, since it's a board meeting as well, that Greenville Tech is funding that transportation.
And out of the 300 or so who are interested, when's the committed date? When do they have to say that they are definitely going to do the program for next year?
As you saw in the timeline, the last parent meeting is on May 28th. So at that time of the parent meeting, that is when parents and students will make that commitment.
Thank you.
Well, at this time, I'm going to ask Ms. Dean to share with you the. I think that gives you a pretty good idea of what this looks like. It actually, when you look at it on your laptop or iPad, it is more clear than looking at it on the larger screen. But it seems to very well capture what's said, very clear as to the audio. You can tell who the people are by aligning them with the names at the top. Now, we can't claim like wait list, and they spelled it like a wait room as opposed to like actually waiting on something. That's all electronically generated. So we're not nobody's sitting over there typing that in. So there may be erroneous spellings that will appear in that crawl at the bottom, but that ensures that it's ADA compliant. Oh, the middle or left. Yeah, we can show that. Thank you. All right. Now, obviously, the only advantage to that is you can see from the back the people sitting here. Now, if you put it in the middle, you can see the 2 people on the end, not really to me, not much of an advantage to that. It seems that bottom left or bottom right is better. Bottom right gives you a little more view of the person presenting. In that case, you can see Coach Nance standing there. So you still get a good view. If there's somebody standing with the presenter, sometimes there are 2 people standing there. This view may capture the second one. The other view probably only captures the one that's actually at the lectern speaking. So that's what the difference in the 3 across the bottom. And obviously, if you put it anywhere else, it obscures the board from view, some number of the board members from view. So in summary, we can, this is a solution we can do. It has no fiscal impact, either through equipment or through personnel time. We simply need the direction of the board. Is it the desire of the board to do this? And if it is the desire of the board to do that, we have provided a recommended motion, but it obviously has some blanks in it where we are requesting that you determine, if it's your desire to video live stream, that you determine which meetings that this would apply to, with the understanding that for it to remain cost neutral, if you expand it to meetings traditionally held outside this venue, we would have to invest in additional technology, or all meetings would have to be held inside this venue. Thank you, Dr. Sowell.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. We appreciate your diligence in this matter, and it's very interesting, and thank you so much to everyone who participated. We have a recommended motion from the administration to utilize existing resources to add video to the current live stream for, and I have a blank, we'll have to fill in which meetings of the Board of Trustees. So before making the motion, when we make the motion, we will fill in the blanks with the meetings that we will live stream. So the floor is open for discussion about that and for questions, beginning with Mr. Sailors.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do like my hairdo in that photograph there. Didn't know I was a blonde at one time, but anyway, thanks, Robin. Currently, the only meetings that we audio live stream are the ones that are in this room, correct? Yes. So the recommendation that this moving to video would be cost neutral would be based on the fact that anything we video live stream would have to still be in this room.
Yes, sir.
So if we go to conference room A for a committee meeting, for say, we can't live stream that one video without purchasing extra equipment. Am I correct?
That's correct.
We have, if we were to go with the other option that you mentioned earlier, where it's we would have to secure equipment that would bring us closer, and quite frankly, I kind of like the distance because it makes me look better. But anyway, no, if you come in and you focus, zoom in, if you will, if we have to purchase that equipment and secure other personnel, have you been able to put a dollar figure associated with it?
No, we went first with, when we determined, and really it was through Dennis Whitehead's work that we were able to determine that we could do a cost-neutral solution. We did not go out and seek others. So if the board were to decide they wish to consider other options, we would need to go out and see what additional technology we would need. And I would imagine, depending on the level of switching video, it would require at least one person, if not more, for the duration of the meeting. And generally speaking, that's going to be somebody that we would have to remove from the job they're currently doing to come in here, like particularly during the day, or to have them come back in the evenings to perform that task. We certainly can gather that information if it's the desire of the board to do that. But since we had this solution and it seemed to certainly provide an acceptable level of coverage, not maybe ideal, we wanted to share that with you first.
Julie, the original legislation, if I remember correctly, was pretty wide open. It just says, in order to be transparent, my words, not the legislation. In order to be transparent, each school system would be required to live stream their meetings. No detail.
In discussion, it said regular board meetings and special called meetings.
Okay, so a special called business meeting of the board. Okay. And most importantly, there's no money attached to this, correct?
No.
And that was the big pushback, especially for smaller districts who have zero live streaming capability currently.
Correct.
So in other words, this is was essentially an unfunded mandate. We have the ability to do it, but others do not.
Correct.
Okay. Madam Chairman, in the for what it's worth category, I think if we're going to video live stream our meetings, I have no problem with that, but it needs to be stipulated for this boardroom only for now. And if the state wants to mandate others, then they need to come up with cash. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to make a point, Mr. Sailors, in the recommended motion from Dr. Royster, the administration, it says utilize existing resources. So once again, that would have to be meetings held in this room.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question, Ms. Doolin.
Thank you. Thank you for doing all the research for this. I'm thrilled that this is sort of what I had in mind with just a total picture of the room rather than the moving cameras. My church uses the moving cameras that zoom in. I think lots of churches do since COVID have live streaming abilities, and I did research that. Those cameras are around $4,000 plus the people to operate them, and it really zooms in right on your face, right as you're talking. So I think this is a great solution. I'm thrilled that it doesn't cost anything. Initially, I thought we would need to plan more, so that's why I suggested we do this beginning in August, but I don't see why we can't start in June, because I think at our May meeting, we would need to approve it. Is that correct? Officially approve it? So we would be doing this starting in June, if everyone agrees? Is that?
I will ask Mr. Whitehead. Mr. Whitehead, would we be ready to begin in June? Oh,
And we could start today if you would like.
thank you. Well, once, Dr. Royster, are you good with us starting immediately? Do you have any objection to that?
I have a problem with that. The only thing that, as you see, we ran a test, but that was not a sustained period of time. You saw like a 2-minute clip that we probably recorded 10 minutes worth. So understanding it might not work exactly like it's supposed to the first time it works, though I have great confidence in what Dennis is doing. But we have no problem with starting it then, just understanding that would really be the first actual trial run of the thing working over, committee of the whole 2.5 hours, maybe sometimes it's 3, sometimes a little bit less than that. That'd be the first real trial of, now, do we lose the camera halfway through? Because, sometimes stuff happens.
I have confidence that it will work the first time.
Appreciate Dennis's confidence.
Thank you.
Video saying that.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Whitehead. And again, thank you for your diligence in this. You have done an excellent job. Dr. Presley.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. I'll come back to you. No, go ahead and continue. Okay, Dr. Presley.
I have no problem with the live streaming as well. I love the distance. And it's just everything's fallen into place because no cost impact. I echo what Mr. Sailors shared. We would not want this to be a cost burden with personnel or anything like that. I've worked in a district who did the live stream and it looked very similar to this. I guess my question would be, or what is the possibility that they could ask more of? Because this room is not a problem. But I do have concerns about, not that we're not transparent about everything that we say and do in any special called meeting or what have you, but is there a probability or a possibility that they're going to require more? And are there other districts who've already taken steps to accommodate for that?
Doug might want to speak to that right now. Based on the way it's written, it would really be a matter of interpretation as to what it requires.
I did an informal sampling of other school districts, larger school districts, and some do not stream, far as live footage. Those that do would be similar to this arrangement, where it would be the regular or special call meetings that the board could take final action on, which would be consistent with the motion. Now, who knows what General Assembly will do in the future in Columbia? We will monitor that, but I believe this would be a substantial step in the right direction as far as transparency and balancing everything else.
Thank you. And again, I have no problem with this. The individual who represented me, you look great, and I'd love to borrow your jacket at some point. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Presley. Ms. Mosley?
Thank you so much. Just a point of clarity, as Mr. Saylors asked my first part of the question about we don't stream anywhere else. So we only audio stream right now in this room, nowhere else. So if we decide to vote to video stream in here, I get it, but would we have the capability, like what kind of costs might be involved if we wanted to audio stream another location, a workshop, for example?
We can do that. The complication is video streaming. I'm not sure we hadn't done that in the past. You recall, Nancy? Well, video streaming, like in another location, it's very simple to do it, but you'd not get anything like this. We do that on occasion when we have a group of people meeting and we use an owl. You know what I'm talking about? It's a column that stands about this high. It's got a camera on it. If you start to speak, it will turn to you. All right. Now, if more than one person starts to speak, it'll become confused. And it doesn't look anything like this. So you can do it. The product is just not very good. And we have several of those owls that are used for instruction or used for meetings. To replicate this would require a camera similar to that, Dennis, and the ability to replicate this audio system. And I'm not sure if A and B at MT Anderson, if there's the ability to tie into that audio like there is here. Do you know, Dennis, or is that something you'd have to check on?
It could be done, yes. It would take some testing, of course, and some setup. This laptop would probably have to come with us in order to do that, because we'd have to have the software that's running on that laptop to bring all of that in.
It would also affect, if we did it with one stationary camera like this, it would affect how you lay that room out. I.e., it always have to be kind of laid out the same way.
I'm not talking about videoing from another, I'm specifically speaking to audio, just audio. Like, so for example, at our MD Anderson workshops, we don't currently audio stream those, but.
No, but we could.
But we could if we decided to just limit the video to this room and we wanted, let's just say, additional transparency, for lack of a better word, we would have the ability to audio stream for a low cost or no cost. I don't know.
We'd have to buy some more microphones.
Okay.
And it's really adding the video to the audio stream is not the hard part. You might think that's the case. It's really what's happening in the background on the computers to get it to YouTube for the stream. So the same manner that you live stream the audio here is what would have to happen at MT Anderson. They would have to have a computer with the softwares installed that connects all of that into the YouTube channel.
For audio.
For audio.
Okay.
The video is literally just using everything that's already set up and making that camera sync up with the audio into that software that's already set. So
it would be the same as Dennis did down here.
Yes, we would have to do the same.
The system was already in existence. That camera was already sitting here. He was able to tie the two together. Down there's not a camera sitting there. So you'd have the expense of putting a camera in to tie back. And likely what we'd want to do is replicate that software. We wouldn't want to be dependent on there being one computer.
Right.
Somebody's got to take it down there. Now, you also then will have to have somebody sit there in those meetings, which we tend to have the long-range facility plan and the budget workshop in those locations. Because the feedback we've gotten over the years is from board members that they sort of preferred that less formal setting for those workshops. We've done some other workshops, but those are the two that occur annually that we have been doing.
Okay, I guess it just didn't occur to me that we weren't audio streaming those, so that's all I wanted to, I was just clarifying. I'm actually okay with this, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Ms. Linda Levinus Wells.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for your confidence.
Thank
You make me feel so much better. And I do appreciate Dr. Skipper sitting here because I didn't have to go to college to get my doctorate, so that's a good thing. But I do want to say, Julie Horton, thank you for that clarity on what is expected of us. I truly believe having it in here is fine. And I think if our legislatures ask for us to do anything more, they need to attach money to it so that it would offset the expense of these school districts.
Without exception, we'll extend for 10 minutes.
I think it's very important that we have the open line of communication with the community so that they can see and hear and know what's going on. And, I commend the district for already having everything in place so that it just makes me feel good that we can just do this and you've handled it. And I thank all of your staff, everybody, for all that they do to get the line of communication open to everyone. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Royster, for this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Linda Levinus Wells. Ms. Brett.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. I just want to say that, the almost year and a half that I have been on this board, I've been contacted by quite a few people asking why we don't do this. And it gets confusing, I think, for people who are listening to know who's speaking and to really know what's going on. I think this right here is perfect. It's what I would imagine. I think it goes exactly, what we are trying to do is be transparent. I think this is the way that we do it. So I appreciate you guys showing this to us, and I think this is the best way that we can do what they're asking us to do right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brett. Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Thank you for this presentation. Dr. Royster, what year is the renovation for the district office scheduled? And will you have the capability to put more of those in if it is required?
Right now, the only schedule for this building is we're looking at the possibility of an addition to it.
Right.
The building itself was occupied in 73. We renovated it in 2007, came back into it in 2007. We're out 18 months. So it was renovated inside, metal walls replaced with sheetrock, new HVAC, new roof, carpet, paint. This past year, we replaced the carpet. So the carpet that was in here, put in 07, it was replaced last year. New paint last year. So right now, it would be several years before we do anything to the existing structure. We talked about and mentioned this during the long-range facility plan. This boardroom does not accommodate the number of spectators that often appear at board meetings, whether for recognition, to meet the requirements of a class, to speak to the board, whatever. You've noticed several times in the last several years, they're lined up out in the hall. We'll all fit in here. The district probably had less than 50,000 students when this building was built. So the district's grown tremendously in that amount of time. So in looking for the next 20 to 25 years, what we are looking at pricing out would be an addition that would allow for a larger boardroom going out the back and to relocate one of the core functions that's currently located here underneath that boardroom. So the core functions that are in this building, the academics division, the HR division, finance, the superintendent's offices, general counsel, the leadership for the schools, all that could remain centralized here. As the district grows over the years, it takes a few more people in those roles, and we now have filled every cubicle, basically every office in this building. Not that we're looking to grow, but over time, the growth of the district will create the need for additional space. So this building should last as it is for a number of years additional, but there needs to be some thought to the next 20 to 25 years. And the other issue is there is a structural issue with the tie-in of the facade, the brick on the outside that you see, to the structure of the building. That's about $500,000 repair that needs to be made. That would be made simultaneously to any addition. And there's not really renovation to this part of the building.
It was in our long-range
Yes,
facilities plan.
what I
though.
just described was in the long-range facility plan.
But what years was that? Was that like?
We do not have a, we do not yet have a
It
year.
didn't have the years on
We
it.
do not yet have a year established. We simply have that as a consideration moving forward.
Okay. I have no problem with us videoing. Thank you, Ms. Morgan, for Ms. Clements for sitting in for me. Isn't that you? Who is that? Right there. Oh, okay. You were in. Okay. Okay. But with having it start, why do we not start the new school year? Because we're out for the whole month of July, right?
That's correct. That's
why
that's
not start in
your call.
August?
All I'm saying is,
Why not
despite
start
Dennis's
in August?
great confidence in this working well, it might go down in the middle of it because we've not tried to run it for 2 or 3 hours.
So
that would be a
you
good
might try
trial
it out during the month of June, and then we really start it up in August. I mean, because that's what I was
It
thinking
doesn't have
about the
any
new
impact
school
to
year.
us when you decide to choose it. Just my cautionary note there is, first long-term run of it, we might have an issue we didn't foresee in a 20-minute run.
Right. Okay. That's all I have, Ms.
Thank you so much. Ms. Doolin, I'm going to return back to you.
The only other issue I thought of that might come up is that when students come to perform, I don't know if we need to make sure that their parent knows that they would be live streamed online, because some students have a do not photograph rule.
Generally speaking, we'd make sure with people doing the pledge individually, but if you're in a performing group, you're performing. So by inference, you're going to be in front of other people. And in those performances, whether the school's videoing them or not, oftentimes numerous people in the audience are videoing them. So if you have a child that you do not wish to be recorded, video or audio, they probably are not participating and shouldn't be in any kind of public performing group. Because again, when you go in front of the public, we don't exercise control over whether they video or audio record something. It'd be virtually impossible to do so.
Well, with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to utilize existing resources to add video to the current audio live stream for regular board meetings, committee of the whole meetings, and special call meetings of the Board of Trustees.
Second. Thank you. We have a recommended motion from Mrs. Doolin and administration to utilize existing resources to add video to the current audio stream for committee of the whole meetings and regular board meetings of the Board of Trustees. We have a second by Mrs. Linda Leventis Wells. Any further discussion? Dr. Presley?
Just a quick point of clarification. We're only approving this for this boardroom, correct?
That's for committee of the whole and regular meetings, this room existing, yes. All right, any other questions? Last call. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Again, thank you, Ms. Doolin, for bringing this forward. Thank you, Dr. Royster, for your work, and Mr. Whitehead, and all the members of the staff for helping to make this presentation possible today. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles.
Our fifth administrative item is 4.05, submittal of names for the audit team committee for 24-25. This item is for information only. Dr. Royster, would you like to speak to this item before I turn it over to Ms. Glenda Morrison-Fair?
Simply, we would certainly encourage board members that are interested in serving on that committee to express that interest. We need, I believe, 5 members of that committee, and I believe, if I recall correctly, the last meeting, Mr. Cochran, that all of those present indicated a willingness to serve again. Yes, sir. Morrison-Fair.
Thank you, Dr. Royster, for that explanation. I would just like to add, if there are any other board members who would like to be considered for this committee, that you would email me or get in touch so that we could add your name to the list. And if we have more than 5, we will vote on that at the board meeting in June. Oh, excuse me, in May. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Glenda Morrison-Fair. Our final administrative item is 4.06, GCS Athletics Programs, Facilities, and Funding. This item was brought to us by Ms. Mosley, Dr. Presley, Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell, and Ms. Middleton, and it is for information only. Dr. Royster?
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. In this presentation, we will answer the following questions that were presented by the requesting trustees. How do our athletic facilities programs in Greenville County, 5A, 4A, 3A, compare to other athletic facilities and programs in South Carolina? How does GCSD continue to remain competitive with facility program improvements over time? What is the percentage or number of students participating in athletics across our 15 high schools? What percentage of our annual budget is allotted for athletics? How much is allotted to each individual high school facilities versus other? What are the dimensions of our football, lacrosse, soccer fields at each of our 15 high schools? At this time, I'll turn this over to Coach Nance. Maybe. Did we lose the presentation? There we go. Coach?
Good morning. Thank you. Going to try to answer a few questions today with our athletic programs and see the...
It's not picking up for some reason.
I usually don't have that problem. It's on. It's on. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Well, good morning. Trying to answer some questions for you today in this presentation about our athletic success and our athletic programs. We're very proud of what we do, and proud of my coaches. And I would like to say that I'm as positive about what we're doing as Dennis is, that we're going to get this done with the live streaming. And so just a few things for you this morning. As you know, we're a G+ school district. We're going to be Graduation Plus. And what we've done is try to turn that into Games Plus with our athletic side. So we want to do the same thing. We want to build a better graduate. And we're going to do it through athletics, through what we do, with all the different things that we provide, and teamwork and leadership, perseverance, diversity, all the things that our coaches and athletes go through. We want to build a better graduate the same way. So we call this Games Plus. And a lot of people look at athletic directors and look at our coaches and think they just play games. They get to go to games. And there's way more to it than just games. It's all the relationships behind it. It's all the work behind it. It's the laundry. It's everything that you have to do for the games. But additionally, it is the emphasis on academics that we do. And we put this in about 8 years ago. In 2016, we started the G+, the GPA Plus, basically our GPA challenge. And so you can see in 23-24, for our varsity athletes, our GPA was 4.08. That's 5,800 plus varsity athletes. And we track their GPAs, and their GPA is 4.08. Now, you can see that 10 high schools had a 4.0 or better GPA among their entire varsity athlete pool. and 175 of our 338 varsity teams had a 4.0 or better average. We really exemplify the student athlete in Greenville County. Our coaches are on the kids about their grades. They are monitoring their grades. And if you came to the game, the Greenville Drive game, who was our beautiful partner with helping us with this, and watch the kids look at the list of who the teams were that won, and they're looking for their school's name. They're looking for their team's name. And when they find it, it may be not their team, but it's their rival team. They will look at each other like, we've got to do this better next time, because kids are competitive. And you can see up there from 2016 when we started this, our GPA was 3.7. 3 high schools had a 4.0, and we had 75 teams. So you can see the growth that this program has created for us in just the last 8 years. On an attendance side, we know athletes come to school more often. They can't miss school. They miss school, they miss practice. They miss school, they miss games. So just from what we see up there, and this is an unexcused absence. Athletes miss on average 3.5 days, where a non-athlete misses 7.5 days. So we have better attendance. And as far as discipline goes, while athletes make up about 33% of the population of our high schools, they only get 15% of referrals. And we can extrapolate down and dig down and look some more into that. And what we find is that most of the athletes don't get any. And then the ones that do are generally not requiring any consequences in the discipline of whatever happened. It's generally cell phone violation or a ID violation, tardy. It's not something that requires discipline. So we think we're doing a very good job in the student athlete arena there. As far as facilities go, we created EdSpecs back in 2000. Maybe a little bit before 2000. This is the ed spec that each high school in Greenville County that we expect to provide. You see a grass irrigation fields, what the stadium should have, practice fields, the number of tennis courts they should have. We've added the 8 rubberized lanes to all the tracks. The tracks are lighted now. Gyms, auxiliary gyms, multi-purpose rooms, and of course in the last 3 years we've completed the weight room or auxiliary rooms for all the high schools. And that's what we expect to have for each of our schools. So that is an ed spec that we created. This is the dimensions of the athletic competition fields. And you can see by school, the football field, which is a standard size field. Every football field is 160 by 360. That's the rule. Then soccer fields, you see variations there. And lacrosse fields, you see variations. And you can see that some schools do not have lacrosse. And then our facilities group went out and did a maximum safe dimensions of all of our fields. And so you can see what each of those is made up. And on the right, you see what is a standard field. Obviously, football is a required 160 by 360. Soccer and lacrosse have more recommended widths, dimensions. There is a kind of a standard. The high school league has a unified field standard of 160. Everybody, all the fields can be, all the sports can play on 160 width. But you see there are some recommended dimensions up there as opposed to required that separates soccer and lacrosse from football. Here's our participation rates. This is from last year. We do not have all of our Title IX data in for this year, but you can see last year of the 22 different sports that were offered among our high schools, 7,587 out of 22,794, or roughly 1/3, played. That is a pretty standard average across the nation. But when you look at multi-sport athletes, where a kid may play football and track, or a girl may play volleyball and basketball, our participation jumps up to 42.7% for multi-sport athletes. In the middle school, we have about 3,024 students out of the 11,978 eligible, because remember, only 7th and 8th grade are eligible to participate, that participated in some sport. 1,634 students played in the 7 middle school sports. We had an additional 1,410 students that participated on high school teams. So some sports are operated by the high schools, whether that's D-team football, whether it's cross country, cheer, tennis, golf, wrestling, some of the sports that middle school students can play up at the high school. So we really like our participation numbers. what we're seeing this year, and we're almost completed with the Title IX audit for this year, is that for the first time since COVID, we have our middle school numbers back. We'll have 2,000 participations among our middle school students this year. And our high school numbers will go back up. So we feel really strongly about our recovery and getting all of our kids back. And we love to see that increased participation. Just some success ratio, just kind of a generic look. In the last 10 years, we've won 102 state championships, and we could probably update that because last weekend Greenville County Schools won 4 more state championships. We have 65 state runners-up. We have 521 region championships, 50 state players of the year just in the last 10 years among all sports, among 3 classifications. All right, because we have 3A, 4A, and 5A schools. So if you look under the state championships, we are about 6.4% of the high school league, and we win about 15% of the state championships. So I think our coaches are doing great, our kids are doing great, and we love to see the success ratio there. But we know that success is not just tied to that championship. That success goes back to that GPA rate, their high attendance, their lesser discipline, and all the positive things they're learning when they're playing sports. Another way to look at some of our success and just kind of look at a few of these sports. In wrestling, we've won 13 state championships and 60 individuals in the last 10 years. 6 girls state championships in lacrosse, 17 in cross country, 10 in track, 8 boys state championships. We've had 9 different girls teams be in the finals. I think 6 of them have won. And in swimming, we've won 27 state championships. And my guess is the individual side and relay side of that, we would be at about 100. It's really hard to find all those, though, from the early years of this. As you can see, we are very, very competitive and very strong. One of the questions was how we compare in support with other districts across the state. I know there's a lot of information on here, but we like to compare ourselves to some of the bigger districts across the state and, of course, with some of our neighbors. And one of the things that we looked at, and I put all the number of high schools each district has under the district name, but does that district provide the following things, like a startup budget? Like, do they pay for transportation or provide money for transportation? Security, primarily for football, but still security for basketball games and other games throughout the course of the year. Do they pay or provide for officials' costs? Do they have artificial turf? And then do they maintain things like irrigation and gym floors? Do they provide for helmet reconditioning? Now, helmet reconditioning is a niche thing. Every football helmet has to be reconditioned at least within every 2 years. Most schools will send them all back every year. We were under a contract with a company that our reconditioning was about $32 to $34 per helmet. And that company broke our contract a year ago. We have not been able to get a contract. Nobody can really. And our helmet reconditioning went from $32 to $34 per helmet to one company charges us $62 and another company charges us $79.99. So imagine going in with a budget of $3,500 to $4,000 for helmet reconditioning, and then your helmet reconditioning is all of a sudden $8,000 to $9,000, $10,000. That's what our schools experienced in the last year and a half, and we know it's coming again. But it's a niche field. It's a high-touch field. And basically, helmet companies would rather sell you a new helmet for $350 than repair a used helmet for $32. So they jumped up the cost of what it takes to recondition one. So you can see some districts do, some don't. We have the gym floor again, the uniform budget, and then do they replace large ticket items like wrestling mats, cheer mats, track equipment? All of those are $7,000 to $17,000 items. And we could add other things in there, and I'll show you some things that we do that we have put in the last 10 years as well. So you can see there are a lot of yeses, there are a few nos, how we really compare. And some districts do have like either it says assist when can, or you can request, or partial, or PIP. I think one says no, but then there's a PIP. They don't do it unless the school really is in a bind and they have a PIP ratio and they can do it. So there's a lot of information there you can dig through. So how do we stay competitive? And we've got 4 slides here on just things that we do to stay competitive in the market and how we compare to other people. And all of this has been done in the last 9 years, okay? Through cooperation with Dr. Royster, the facilities, our research, through commitment through the Board of Trustees and the budget. All of these are things that have been added in just the last 8 years now. We have contracted field maintenance every year for all of our competition fields and practice fields. Mower crews that cut them. We no longer have coaches out on lawnmowers. We have people who know what they're doing on lawnmowers that are designed to cut those fields. We maintain all of our tennis courts. We maintain all of our tracks. We do drainage work on fields and repair and maintain irrigation systems. This used to be done individually by schools, and you never knew what you were getting. And now it's all done through contracted services through facilities. We have scoreboard replacement. Stadium Wi-Fi and security systems have been updated. Maintenance, lighting, sound systems. All right, all of that just outside. Here's some inside. We refinish gym floors yearly. No more coaches riding around trying to do a buffer on the machine. You know, we do it contracted correctly. Contracted bleacher service, goal maintenance, and again, scoreboards for inside replacement. And then other equipment. Ice machines are necessary for athletic training rooms. And other equipment for our athletic trainers to use. Washers and dryers, wrestling mats, cheer mats, high jump, pole vault. We have district-wide bids now for all athletic equipment, weights, cloth, you name it. We've got a district-wide bid that our schools can easily address any of their needs. And then from a personnel and finance standpoint, you can see we established the full-time ADs, the assistant ADs. We've added coaching supplements across the board, really. All the middle schools got them. We raised our supplemental pay to top 10 in the state, extra duty supplements for playoff advancement, and we added an extra assistant to the district AD office in 2019. And then, of course, the district provides yearly supplements for all of our coaches. In transportation, there's a fuel allowance that we do provide. It's split among all the schools. It does not cover all of the transportation needs, but it covers a percentage. We provide funding for activity bus repairs and service, and the district has assumed the purchase and maintenance of all activity buses. And at the end of the next fiscal year, all the buses will be done with all the local buses. When schools had to go out and buy their own and they bought what they could afford, we don't have to worry about that anymore. They get all new buses. They're all maintained by our group. And then, of course, the new construction from weight rooms and the multi-purpose facilities, which not only did we do that, but also we provided funding to help purchase the equipment to go into those new weight rooms. So that's kind of my side of it. I'm going to turn it over now to Robin to look at some of the funding side.
Good morning, everybody. We have put together a 5-year spending, athletic spending expenditures for the period of FY 2020 through FY 2024. And this first page is a summary of those expenditures, and we've looked at it. Sorry, I'm not as tall. We've looked at it as a percent to budget. So this first page, the top section shows you the budget for general fund and capital fund for those 5 years. The next section totals the athletic expenditures from each fund for that same time period. And it also provides a percent of the prospective budget. So for instance, general fund, the total expenditures, and underneath those totals for the expenditures are the percent to budget. So you can see general fund's pretty constant each year at a 1% of budget. The next is your capital fund totals, and you can see that those percentages to budget vary based on the year, and if you look at 22 and 23, those percentages increased, and that's when the bulk of the weight room expenditures, construction for the weight rooms, were in those 2 years. And then that bottom section is another way to look at this. It's for both funds. a 5-year average. So for general fund, the 5-year average budget was $746 million. Total expenditures are shown, and the percent of budget is 1%. And for the capital fund, the same thing. You see a 5-year average budget, a 5-year average for your expenditures, and the percent of budget was 6%. And if you combine the two funds for that 5-year period, the percent to budget increases to 2%. Now, the next 2 pages shows breakdown of those expenditures into line items, and most of them Darryl talked about in his screens. So the first page is the expenditures from the capital accounts. And I'm not going to go through here and read all this, but I do want to point a few of them out. The very first line is the activity buses. Darryl mentioned that the district took over purchasing those for schools. And you can see from FY 2020 to 2024, the expenditures of the buses that were purchased. We expense those over the life of the activity bus, so you see each year there. And for that 5-year period, that was a $1.7 million expenditure. Going on down the list, the Greer High School Auxiliary Gym is just under $1.8 million. Directly under that one, a gym flooring replacement is just under $1.4 million. A little bit further down, we'll go in to look at scoreboards. Darryl mentioned those during that 5-year period is $367,000. A little bit further down, the stadium sound systems replacement, $368,000. The track maintenance and replacement is $1.3 million. And finally, the weight rooms there is $33.9 million. And the total 5-year annual average spend on athletics was $8.7 million out of the capital accounts. The bottom section, we put a note there because we looked at the cost of the construction of the athletic facilities at Fountain Inn High School. And these athletic facilities are do not include the multi-purpose room that's built at most schools, but all the other athletic facilities. And that came in at $4.3 million. And also there are some startup funds for a new school that's provided, and it's to purchase athletic team equipment, uniforms, etc. And that was $437,000. So when you combine those two, that's a $4.7 million spend. The next page is for our general fund accounts. And it's split into a couple of sections here. The first section is district-wide athletic expenditures. And again, Darryl's pointed these out in his information. But the second line there is your school athletic directors. And this is the salary and fringe for the athletic director over that same 5-year timeline. And you can see the total for that is about $7 million. Going on down a little bit, we provide the athletic transportation for both middle school and high school at some level, as Darryl mentioned there in his report. If you come down just a couple of more lines, activity bus maintenance per year. We bought the buses and we also maintained the buses. So during this same time period, that was $1.8 million. Directly under that is your supplements for both your middle schools and your high schools, and that's salary and fringe. And for that same timeline, it's $3 million for your middle school supplements and $22.4 million for your high school supplements. A little bit further down, Darryl mentioned the athletics groundskeepers. The salary and fringe over the 5-year timeline was $1.9 million. And the 5-year annual average for this district-wide athletic spend is about $7.9 million. The next section details a little of the maintenance and operations athletic spend. The first one is your athletic field maintenance with contracts at $1.5 million. The internal athletic field maintenance, purchase of supply and equipment you see there. And then gym bleachers, basketball goal repair and maintenance, and gym flooring refinishing, which is a contract and internal spend. And the 5-year annual average for that category is $543,000. And the final section at the bottom of this page addresses the security spend for athletics. When we purchased the Evolve systems back in and put them in place in 2023, about 11% of the total time that they were in use was for athletic events. And you can see the 2-year annual average there for security is around $42,000. So that gives you an idea of a 5-year snapshot of athletic spend from both the general fund and the capital accounts. And we're here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nance, Ms. Stack, and Dr. Royster for that very informative presentation. I can say, I believe on behalf of the board, it certainly gives us a better understanding of where we are with our athletics and what's taking place, and just can't thank you enough for that. At this time, we're going to open the floor for questions, beginning with Dr. Presley.
Well, I've spent the bulk of my career in curriculum and instruction land, so I may have some pretty basic questions. And Mr. Nance, I am looking at the slide that, we'll talk about dimensions in just a second, but the slide that talks about the artificial turf.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I noticed that we've got 13 districts listed, and 2 out of the 13, Greenville and Berkeley, do not have artificial turf. Can you help me with, and again, I know you can't go probably in depth, but as far as the pros and cons of artificial turf, and specifically, how would it or could it impact any drainage issues that we have across the district? And what would be the ballpark cost of putting artificial turf on our football fields?
If I might, Dr. Presley, could we hold your question till the next presentation? We're going to speak specifically to your question.
Is that today?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
In I think it's 5.02. Is that right?
Perfect. Okay.
5.01.
And so would it be beneficial, Dr. Royster, if I held the question about the field dimensions until then as well?
Probably.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. Ms. Mosley?
Thank you so much. I also echo Dr. Presley's appreciation for just kind of, I've been on the board now almost 4 years, and we just haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about athletics. And so obviously with a lot of the questions that have come out from the JL Man Booster Club, I just thought it begged the question for all of us on the board to kind of benefit a little bit more of understanding where we stand, what looks like. I just had a real quick question. So back, and this may have been answered with Robin's last point about security in the Evolve system, but it said on that one field that for us, security, it says no, then it has an asterisk, pays for 1 additional security personnel for the parking lot at games. But then, so I was gonna ask about the Evolve system because I know we run that at games. So does that come out? I guess I'm wondering why we answered no here, but we do provide security.
Okay, so yes, ma'am.
Just trying to connect that dot.
The school is responsible, each school is responsible for hiring security for inside the stadium for their events. We pay for 1 extra security person to take care of parking lots And so we pay for that. Actually, it comes out of Dr. Royster pays
It's
for
not
that.
their budget, it's coming out of, it's
Correct.
coming out of.
So that's
okay.
our budget.
Okay.
And then Evolve is a separate budget. So
Okay.
Evolve cannot be at every game, but
Right.
they are at whatever game is requested and what we view as necessary games, right?
Okay, that's, I just want to
And
clarify.
that's not back charged to them. That's just prorating how much of their time they spend doing that to give you that's a district investment, for lack of a better description of it, on the Evolve system.
Okay.
And to put a little finer point on what Darrell said, that security person we provide for outside the stadium, that's a commissioned police officer that we do based on some issues we had several years ago, and the fact that schools are facing ever increasing cost for employing law enforcement officers in side jobs. Several years ago, that was $25 to $30 an hour.
Yes, sir.
It now approaches $50 to $60 an hour, and there is even some difficulty in securing enough of them because there are so many competitive side jobs for them to work on weekends.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Particularly in and around some of the municipalities. So that's an area we've tried to assist them with. And we do have guidance in our district security plans based on size of crowds and that sort of thing and type of venue as to how many security personnel they need to have present for different contests.
Okay. That's good to know because I know that's important to a lot of folks, including me. Okay, so going back to the ed spec slide, let me just make sure I'm understanding the lingo here. When you're saying ed specs, you're saying based on high school population size, this is what we sort of determined as a district should be the requirement or the minimum at each high school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then down here under practice fields where it says 4 practice fields if land's available. Okay, so that's a caveat, if land is available. Clearly, we're having some issues at some of our high schools. So how do we accommodate that if this is part of what we require or we say is appropriate for a school and we can't do it based on land availability? What do we do?
I
don't know who I'm asking this.
The absolute minimum is we provide a second lit field for every school. And I don't think there is a school that doesn't have 3, Darrell, is that right? Is there a school that doesn't have 3
practice fields?
Practice fields. If you count the stadium field.
Correct. They would all have
So they've got at least 2 additional practice fields beyond practicing on the stadium field. Land, to your point, is an issue. And the cost of land is an issue. And acquisition of property contiguous to the school is an issue. And if you acquire property remote from the school, it creates other issues. You have to provide parking. You have to provide higher level of security because it's away from the school. So there are a number of issues around that. Sites we have acquired recently, we've acquired larger sites that were acquired during BEST for a number of reasons, or smaller sites. One thing, they were trying to make sure that they could address all the necessary building needs and be cognizant of the more property they had to purchase, the greater that influenced the overall budget for replacement of facilities. So we have we tend to look now for larger tracts of land, particularly for high schools. Fountain Inn's a good example. We've got a pretty good tract of property there, but we don't probably have as many practice fields as we'd like to have there. They've basically got stadium field, 2.5 others, Colonel. That'd be a fair assessment. You can practice just about any sport on a 70-yard practice field, but coaches tend to prefer having a 100-yard practice field minimum.
So how many schools fall in that category of less than what we would, I guess, recommend? Do we have,
Do you have that with you, Darrell? We'd have to send that later.
I'll have that at the.
And if we try to reel them off by memory, we'd probably leave one out.
Okay, because you just answered the second part of my question is going forward with any type of land acquisition, do we accommodate? But it sounds like even with Fountain Inn, we weren't able to secure enough to to meet the spec. I guess I'm wondering is who's meeting the spec if our newest school isn't meeting the spec?
So
that's what I'm-
actually, some of our older, smallest schools
Okay.
meet the spec more so than some of our newest ones.
But are those also the schools that don't need them as much? So for example, I'm assuming when I see NA on here, like under lacrosse, that those schools don't have a lacrosse
They don't
program,
have
for
lacrosse,
example.
correct.
Currently, they don't. We started, I believe, with
Started with 8.
8 schools having lacrosse, and now 10.
Fountain Inn added girls this year. They intend to add, their hope is to add boys next year.
And you're kind of hitting on there's a bigger issue here that sort of goes again to 5.01.
Okay, well then I will stop right there. Let me
Not that that's going to be
No,
the
no, it's
absolute
fine. I'm
solution
happy
to it,
to-
but it kind of goes to that.
Okay, I'm happy to save my question. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, yes, that's everything I have about this right now. Thank you so much for this information. I may have additional questions once
Certainly.
I read through it again.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Mr. Cochran?
Thank you. I just had a question, first of all, about transportation. Most of our drivers for our athletic teams, are they coaches with CDL licenses, or are they mostly school bus drivers during the day and then driving for our athletic teams in the evenings?
It's about half and half. Coaches, schools are trying to get their coaches to get their CDLs, and we reimburse that. That's one of the expenses that we have for some professional development that we'll reimburse, not only for the physical, but for their renewal, license renewal. Most schools, I would say, have between 5 and 10 CDL drivers. And what they'll do is, of course, they drive theirs, but they may wind up driving for some other coach because it's actually cheaper if they do it all in-house. When they cannot find a driver, they will schedule a driver through the bus office, through the bus center.
Our school bus drivers that are driving, are they compensated at the same rate in the evenings driving for athletics that they are during the day?
Most of them are going to get time and a half because they're going to go into overtime.
Yes.
So at minimum, yes, sir, they would get their regular wage, but a lot of that's going to be overtime.
Right.
I would imagine it would still be the case, Darrell, that more likely that our bus drivers are driving if it's a later contest.
Yes.
They're probably more likely to be driving, say, for football, varsity basketball than they would be for track or baseball or softball, because then you got that conflict with when they end their routes. So I'm going to imagine we're still more heavily skewed to the school drivers doing spring sports and sports that start earlier in the afternoon.
Middle school, sub-varsity, spring, going to be local driver. Yes, sir.
And my only other question, that 2% that we mentioned when we combined both budgets together that we're spending on athletics, how does that compare to most of the other school districts in the state?
So typically nationwide, it's 2 to 3% of a school district's budget. So we're right there in the middle, with nationally, we're right there. Yes, sir.
Problem with trying to do a one-to-one comparison inside the state, it took hours for finance working with Coach Nance to do this breakdown because you're paying for things out of different accounts. Part of them are out of capital. Part of them are out of the general fund budget. Some of them are prorated. For example, the activity bus maintenance. We've got a heavy motor shop. They work on all buses that belong to the district. So that had to be prorated out to the athletic use based on the percentage of the time the athletics uses activity buses. On big areas of expenditure, you can go to the State Department's Insight data. We've shared that with you all before. There is no listing in Insight for athletics. So you can't break out athletic expenditures and do a true one-to-one comparison. We'd have to ask each school district in the state, and almost without exception, I really can't think of one that would be able to tell you real quickly, they would have to go through exactly what we went through in order to get a direct one-to-one comparison. So I guess the next best thing we have is when you look at however they have compiled nationwide statistics, because there's not any centralized reporting of this at the state level or nationally as to what people spend on athletics. My guess is they they survey schools and they do a sample size, and they infer from that sample that most districts spend about 2%. And we seem to be right on that 2%.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stiles. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Ms. Linda Levinas Wells?
Mhm.
I'm looking over this, the first slide, well, the slide under all the championship.
Mhm.
Because I'm going to hold the dimension part till the next
Mhm.
session. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I see that we have no, and so please help me understand startup budgets.
Mhm.
We don't have a startup budget.
Correct.
Transportation, we pay for
A percentage of it, yes, ma'am.
pays the other.
The school does.
And they have to raise that money?
Yes, ma'am. Through either ticket sales or booster clubs or local funds.
Security,
Mhm.
there's a.
We pay one and they pay the rest.
They pay the rest.
Yes, ma'am.
That's through Booster Club, et cetera.
Tickle, yes.
We don't have officials, we don't pay for any.
Correct.
The schools have to pay.
Correct.
Irrigation, we pay for.
Yes, ma'am.
So we don't pay for that helmet reconditioning,
It's a school expense.
and that could go up to $79 a helmet.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Most schools have between 100 and 150 helmets they send in every year,
so the Booster Club has to raise money for that, or it comes from the parents?
where it comes from school. Yes, ma'am.
Love public education. Gym floor maintenance, we do take care
We
of.
do that now, yes.
The uniform budget, I knew as a coach, I helped pay for that.
Right.
So I get that.
Right.
Um,
And we do the other big items. We do those. We replace those.
okay, that is interesting and disappointing at the same time.
A couple of reminders
Yes, sir.
about that, Ms. Levinas Wells. Transportation, where it just shows a percentage, as a reminder, we're buying those activity buses now. At one time, the school had to buy them,
Yeah, I remember.
which is,
I raised money,
which is for a new one would be about a $90,000 investment apiece. And we will have soon replaced close to 150 there, 140 some odd buses over the period of time we started doing that, with the last 4 scheduled to be replaced in 25. The other reminder is you may recall, in the general fund budget, we have proposed a line item based on the number of students in a school for the support of pupil activities, tempered by a factor for the poverty level of the school, which would provide at least some additional amount of funding that at the high school level could be applied to some of these expenses they have for operating athletic programs.
Are there no federal grants that offset costs for poverty students? Is there nothing out there?
Not in extracurricular.
There are a few foundation grants, and we've gotten some to do various things, but they don't tend to support the operation of athletics. You know, one might think that the big money spent on college athletics and the even bigger money spent on pro athletics, well, where all those players get their start is at our middle schools and our high schools throughout this country. There is no support in any quantifiable amount that comes from either of those two sources to help to offset the cost of basically developing their athletes before they reach them.
So maybe when we get the dimensions right and these students that play soccer or other sports, they'll give back and maybe donate a fee.
Let's hope so.
But when they're playing on a short field, it's difficult. Okay, so let me keep going.
We still win a lot. We still win a lot.
It's some at the cost of some injuries. I don't want injuries. As a coach, I know my main focus
Well,
is
that's part of
preventive measures.
some of the narrow issue with the field is to prevent injury.
I understand that. So what I'm looking at is the general fund in 2020. It was $7,722,000 with extra dollars. And then in 2024, it increased in 4 years, almost 2.3 million. Is that correct, Robin? I could have, my math may be wrong. It's almost 2 million. And then the capital was 5.4 million, and now it's 7, so 7.7 million. So that's we in 4 years just keep going higher and higher and higher and higher by millions, not 150,000 or anything. We're talking millions. And when I look at the salary and fringe, so for an athletic director here, there was an increase from 2020 to 2024 in 4 years to $30,000. So 30,000, and that doesn't include the salary fringe or athletic director. I'm trying to see, I'm trying to follow all of these extra, and when you add them up, it's really kind of interesting. So you have the athletic director that increased from 2020 to 2024 by almost 30,000. So 4 into that, 30,000.
So each year that the board approves a raise for employees, we also apply that percentage to salaries across the board. So it would also be applied to the athletic director's pay as well as the supplements. And if there's any increase in fringe, like when retirement was going up, it's capped now, but these years the retirement percentage was going up like 1% a year. That is also in these figures. So that caused some of the increase you see.
What I'm seeing is a teacher gets this and someone in another position gets that. I'm all about approving teacher raises, but I'm also trying to make sure that we stay in reason when it comes to all of these administrative positions that teachers are getting a $3,000 raise and others are getting.
Excuse me, Miss Linda Levitas Wells, could you please just ask the question?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to figure out is when it comes to all of these, we've added a lot of additional positions to athletics. Is that correct?
And it's assistant coaches in several sports.
Assistant coaches and extras. All it is.
In that same time frame, we added an athletic director. We added a high school at Fountain Inn, and we added a middle school athletic director. So some of that is just going to be another position. The athletic directors are paid on a teacher contract, right? So they get what a teacher gets. Then they get a supplement. That supplement would only go up if it's a 3% increase. They get a 3% increase as the step as a teacher, and the supplement goes up to keep us competitive around the state.
The athletic directors at the schools also get a supplement for an aide or whoever.
There is an assistant AD supplement that was added, yes, 8 years ago.
Is that a full-time person?
No.
I mean, is that a teacher working there that does something?
It is.
So then that teacher gets an additional supplement. And how much are those supplements?
About 7,800, I think. They can be split. Yeah, can be split multiple ways.
By the board in the budget several years ago, has a 1.0 full-time athletic director who oversees 30 teams, 30-plus teams.
Oh, yeah.
They're paid on the teacher's salary schedule, and they receive a supplement for all of the afternoon and nighttime hours they put in addition to during the day. Every year, we recommend a salary increase for all employees. For non-teaching employees, it has always, at least in the last probably 10 years, been 1% less than the average raise given to all teachers when you convert it to a percentage. They get that percent applied to their supplement schedule. That percent, this year it's proposed to be 3.5%. That percent is applied to every pay schedule in the district. Administrative schedule, supplement schedule. Supplements are not just coaches, band directors, choral directors, all kinds of supplements at the high school and middle school level. The pay schedule for the members of the Board of Trustees is applied to all pay schedules in the district. So each year you would expect to see an incremental growth in those line items. What you will also see over time is an experienced athletic director leaving, perhaps replaced by a less experienced one. They'll make less money. You may see an inexperienced athletic director or a less experienced one leaving, replaced by a more experienced one. They'll make more money. So when you consider there are now 15 of those positions, and in 2020 there were 14, and the amount of the difference in that period of time is a little over $30,000, that's really not a very significant change considering that's a 5-year period of time. Assistant athletic directors, that is simply a supplement to someone who is working a full-time job in that school, likely a full-time teacher. In some cases, it might be a person in another role. It could be a counselor. It could be a classroom aide employee that has the skills to be an assistant athletic director. Those are simply supplements. They're not release time positions. But that was a huge advance, and if you look at other districts in the state, makes us more comparable to other districts in the state to have athletic directors who can focus on managing and leading the athletic programs in their schools. We now require those individuals to obtain national certification. They're not all there yet, but part of that is because they have to have how many years experience before they can obtain certification there?
Minimum of 2 years experience, plus they have to meet a professional development form that requires 65 points that they attain for things they've done, and typically it takes 4 to 5 years to get the 65.
We require those people to obtain that national certification in accord with the requirements for seeking that certification. You can't just come in and you can't have it coming into it unless you were already experienced. And if you're inexperienced, you've got to invest that first couple of years in being qualified to obtain that.
I was just trying to figure out how many cars that we have to add millage increase to get that $8.30 up to making those salaries. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Leventis Wells. Ms. Mosley?
Thank you. And I think my question may have been answered, but I've got a little bit of a headache, so I'm going to ask it anyway. So let me just make sure I'm clear. The athletic director is an administrative role on the staff of the school. And so, like, I'm thinking about my child's high school. So our principal has a budget for her staff. His salary is paid out of her budget, or is it paid out of a separate athletic budget, or is this just the way it's listed, a line item on the, I mean, I'm just trying to, I'm sorry, it's sort of an accounting question.
I'm going to answer it a little different way.
Okay.
Because they get, it's not really a budget. Their personnel are assigned on FTEs.
Okay.
So they'll get we call it a baseline. On their baseline, there'll be like a 1.0 FTE principal.
Okay.
Based on their size, east side, maybe it's 4. We have like 4.0 FTE assistant principals.
Right.
7 or 8 counselors, FTEs. They'll have a 1.0 FTE for athletic director.
Okay.
And they would fill that position by, now they could split that. I don't think anybody is splitting it right now. Generally speaking, it's one person. Now we did have.
It is what, so.
One place we had somebody teaching one period, because I don't remember which school it was now. They could not find a teacher for one class, one period, and they had the AD doing that one class. but it's set there that they do not have to teach, and most of them do not.
Okay, so when we are throwing out numbers for money spent on athletics, we're including the athletic director's salary out of that bucket versus
Yes.
administration of a school bucket.
Right.
I
It's
don't know
it's
how else to
shown
say
in
it.
this listing
Okay.
here. Right now, in those reports that we generate that you see during the budget, that would be school professional other. Robin, it's in the second column of people, isn't it?
Instructional support.
Instructional support. It's not in the first one where the teachers are.
Okay.
You know, the chart it's got a really
Yes.
big person and then they get ever smaller.
Yeah.
It's in the second one.
Okay, I was just, bless you, just, bless you, just making sure I had clarification. Thank you, I'm done.
You now may or may not remember your next question.
Before I extend time, I'm going to ask if there are any further questions on this item. Okay.
I would like to say,
Well, if there's more comments, let's extend for another 5 minutes without objection. Go ahead, Mr. Nance.
thank you. Just some more numbers. I know it's a lot of numbers, but you have kids that play. A lot of you have kids that play or participate in different things. Our average nights that the lights are on at a high school for an athletic event is 101 nights out of 180 school days. There's an athletic event 101 days. 20 of those are Saturdays that we're asking them to work on the weekend. Coaches are working, parents are working on the weekend in the concession stands, whatever, right? Our high this year, we had one school that had an event 124 days. 124 days they hosted events. The lowest was only 65, and it's one of the smaller schools that doesn't have all the teams, but the average is 101 days. That does not count playoffs because you can't count on that. So then you maybe add some more playoffs. The number of events, if you host, because of all the teams that we have, varsity, JV, C team, D team, whatever we have, on average you host 180 home events. 180 home events. The largest number hosted by any school this year was 260. The lowest number hosted was 107. So just think about the number of exposures you get for not only success and how many times those kids are playing and they're supervised and they're loved on and they're supported and cheered for, but that also goes into, every time you have an exposure, there's a chance for an injury. There's a chance that something could go wrong. And that's why we need security, and that's why we have all these the things that we do, right? But like even our athletic trainers, we struggle to find athletic trainers in our contract with Prisma. They are worn out. Athletic trainers are worn out from the number of competitions we have, and we have multiple schools that have multiple sites. A trainer can't be at two places at one time. It's hard to cover a soccer game and a softball game. Well, it's hard for an AD to be at multiple sites and multiple games every single night. So a lot going on, a lot of numbers. Just think about it, 101 nights or Saturdays and 180 events on your campus. And that doesn't count all the practices. For 12,000 athletes across this county, 1,200 coaches for over 600 teams, and still have a 4.0 GPA. That's pretty doggone good. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Mr. Nance. We really appreciate that. And thanks again, Ms. Stack. Moving on to Ms. Middleton is online and she has a question.
Yes, I apologize. We had some technical difficulties. She was not able to access the audio feed, so she sent me her questions.
Okay.
So Mrs. Middleton asks Coach Nance, how does each school handle any students that fall below the GPA requirement, as well as discipline and attendance?
So there's really, so of the 5 schools that did not meet 4.0, they actually all improved from last year. So each of them tracks all their schools, all the teams, and we track. So they all have improved, even though they haven't actually met the 4.0. But it's just a challenge that we want them to do better every year. So it's not that they failed to meet a particular standard, or a challenge that we made to them individually. It's just we try to push that and recognize. And any of those teams that made the 4.0 still get recognized at the drive game, because all the schools come, all the teams come, they get recognized, we have a reception, the winning teams, the teams that win the GPA challenge get recognized on the field, but every team's name is scrolled on the big scoreboard and on the TV boards and things like that. So they're all still recognized. And then the second part was attendance.
Discipline and attendance, and I'm wondering if she's referring to, is there a minimum GPA or discipline and attendance to participate in athletics?
There's a GPA requirement from the high school league. What is it, Daryl?
The GPA requirement for high school league is 1.0. Yeah, all you have to do is have a 1.0 and pass 5 classes in the last year. We don't have that issue.
They're also related to discipline. There is a separate discipline policy that's standardized district-wide, applied at the school level, related to athletic participation. So if you get in trouble in school for more serious things, there is a defined policy that may require you to sit out a certain number of games.
Yes.
They require that you separate from the sport for the rest of the season, depending on the seriousness of the offense. So there is a concurrent discipline code that is applied to students who choose to participate and are selected to participate representing the school in athletics, separate and apart from the sanction imposed for their misconduct by the school itself.
Right. And if you're absent on a game day, you do not play. I mean, there's an attendance requirement. And there's some certain exceptions if there was a funeral or but attendance is required to participate. And even you may get a lesser referral, but a coach is not going to be happy about that, because the reflection on the coach, the team, the whole process, you may get a little extra opportunity to get some exercise in.
There are about 3 more questions, so we will need more.
Okay, so without objection, we'll extend for 10 minutes.
Okay, the next questions have to do with tennis. How many schools have fewer tennis courts than needed to have full competitions without waiting for an open court?
Two, to my knowledge. Malden, to my recollection right now, Malden only has 4. One of our larger schools, and has had significant success, but they only have 4, and that is a landlocked situation. There's just no real other place to put 2 more tennis courts for them. Greenville High has 5 wedged in by the parking lot, but I think everybody else, with the exception of Fountain Inn, and Fountain Inn will get theirs in the remaining 2 in the construction phase, meets their need for tennis courts.
Ideally 6, if I remember right, Coach.
6 is the preferred.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, are all the tennis courts lighted?
Yes.
Okay. And last question was, how do ticket sales and parking fees factor in? Where does that money go?
So tickets are, all the ticket sales go into the school general account or the athletic account, typically 101 or either the different account numbers for different sports. So they're all monitored and recorded and deposited, and they go into the school account. And from there, then typically it may be broken out to pay for officials, pay for security, pay for transportation for that particular sport. Parking fees are generally collected by Booster Club in support of the teams, for them to then turn around and provide extras or pay for transportation or things like that. That they typically it goes into the big Booster Club fund, and then the Booster Club will somehow support the school with those monies.
Thank you. She has responded that It's her understanding that JL Mann also does not have the 6 tennis courts.
They have 6.
What? Sorry. They do have 6? Okay.
Yeah, JL Mann has 6 tennis courts, yeah.
Thank you for those questions, Ms. Middleton. And thank you for joining us online. Sorry you can't be here today. Moving right along to our 5th matter of business, building and grounds. Ms. Brett, I'm going to ask you to serve as chair of this section.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Looking at agenda item 5.01, I think everyone will be excited to hear this. This is the Unified Playing Field Minimum Dimension Project. Dr. Royster?
Thank you, Ms. Brett. You all will recall that I shared with you some information regarding unified playing surface. I also shared with you all some concerns we have over there being a pretty wide variance in the width of playing surfaces among our schools. So, as some background, a lot of this came about as you all heard a presentation from some folks from JL Mann. As a reminder, as a part of the new school project, because we're having to demo some existing facilities, we're replacing those. So as part of that, we're building a new softball field, a new restroom concessions building and plaza shared by baseball and softball. We're renovating the baseball press box and restrooms and refreshing those dugouts. We're renovating and adding new home side parking. We're replacing and upgrading the visitor side parking. We're adding a new team bus loading area. We're adding parking for softball, which during elementary school hours would be the elementary faculty parking lot. We're renovating and upgrading practice fields, and we're improving site lighting and security. If we weren't doing the new construction there, most of those upgrades would not occur. That's budgeted over $3 million, and the funds are included, as you all will recall, in the project of building the new elementary school. Separate from the new facilities, there is a drainage issue at the unified football, soccer, lacrosse field. The district has committed in writing to the school community and the Booster Club leadership to address and resolve the drainage issues at Slayton Field. There are multiple approaches to effectively address those drainage issues. The costliest solution, you all heard, proposed to the board by members of the JL Mann Booster Club, addresses the drainage, effectively addresses the drainage. It also expands the width of the playing surface, providing, in their words, and by our athletic experts' interpretation as well, a competitive advantage for soccer and lacrosse. It's important to note that the current width of the field meets any required or recommended minimum width for both soccer and lacrosse, and that's the area that lies outside the current drainage area. Some statements have been made that JL Mann's facilities were built for a 3A school, while it is now in a South Carolina High School League 5A classification. In fact, the current JL Mann facility was built to serve the largest classification in existence at that time, which was 4A. The largest school currently in 5A is no bigger than the largest school that was in 4A at that time. Additionally, as provided in the earlier presentation to the Committee of the Whole, we maintain the same standards of athletic facilities quality for each school, regardless of size, same minimum. The only distinction is based on school size is the seating capacity. And we have added seating at Slayton Field at Mann Stadium since the BEST program to accommodate the growth of the school as we have at other high schools. As shown in the attached chart on the board, there are 9 high schools in the district with field widths less than 180 feet, so less than 60 yards. 6 of these schools play lacrosse, and all 9 have soccer teams. In the 24 to 26 high school league classifications, 5 of the 6 lacrosse teams will end up in a playoff structure together and in 2 region schedules playing one another. The 6th team will likely join those schools in 5A in the next reclassification. So absent a plan to increase the width of all 9 fields, fulfilling the specific request of the man booster clubs would have the effect of the district funding a more expensive solution to the drainage problem, but more importantly, it creates additional disparity between our own schools that compete head-to-head with one another. We have funds budgeted to address the field drainage issue. For some reason, that seemed to be a question. We have funds budgeted to do that, fix the drainage. To address the field width issue is another matter. So I directed our facilities department to review each of those fields, to look at what might be a solution that would get us to a minimum to give us 60 yards. So all of them would have 180 feet of width without being into a drainage area in any place that creates an unsafe condition due to the slope and the physical location of the drain. So that would require the following. This is in the narrative that you have in front of you. It's not on the screen. At Eastside High School, modifying the existing football field, regrading it to provide appropriate slopes for athletic play, provide adequate drainage for all areas on and off the playing surface. You've got to put in a new irrigation system because when you regrade, you're going to have to replace the irrigation system. Existing drainage structures will be relocated outside the field of play, and a new storm drainage infrastructure will be added where necessary to provide appropriate drainage for the field. The estimated cost of that for Eastside, $506,800. Hillcrest High School, the existing football field will be modified to accommodate a 180-foot wide field suitable for lacrosse and soccer. The field will be regraded to provide appropriate slopes for athletic play and to provide adequate drainage for all areas on and off the playing surface. A new irrigation system will be provided as a result of the regrading, and existing drainage structure will be relocated outside the field of play. New storm drainage infrastructure will be added where necessary to provide adequate drainage for the field. Estimated cost $477,565. J.L. Mann Academy Athletics Complex. Existing football field modified to accommodate a 180-foot wide field suitable for lacrosse and soccer competition. The field will be regraded to provide a playing surface appropriately crowned down the middle of the field and sloped to each sideline. The field will provide appropriate slopes for athletic play and adequate drainage for all areas on and off the playing surface. New irrigation system will be provided as a result of the regrading. New storm drainage infrastructure will be added on both sides of the field, necessary to appropriately drain the newly constructed playing surface. The estimated cost of that is $564,392. The one thing that is peculiar to J.L. Mann that, in my experience, I'd never seen before I saw it there. In every football field, every field designed as a football field. This is not always true of soccer and lacrosse if you design something specifically with them, but even they're going to have some degree of crown for drainage purposes. There's a crown down the center of a football field. If you stood right under the goalpost and looked at the other one, that should be the highest spot in the field, running straight up the center of the field, from goal line to goal line. And at the two ends, it should look like this, sloped down from the field toward the end zone. So it looks like a Y on both ends. The field at J.L. Mann is crowned, when I say the hash mark, if you recall looking at a football field, even if you're not familiar with football, there's some lines between the center of the field and each sideline. They're called hash marks. You got the yard lines going across this way. And over there, about quarter away across the field, there's a hash mark. J.L. Mann's football field is crowned to the hash mark on the home side. So nearly 2/3 to 3/4 of that field slopes this way. And 1/4 to 1/3 of it slopes this way. I've never seen a football field so constructed. Now, you know, we did a little history of athletic fields and what we do now. We didn't go back far enough. If you go back far enough, fields were constructed generally by the schools. Now, that would not be true since the BEST program. But if you go pre-BEST, the last example before BEST was Serene Stadium, which was redone. And I believe the split on it, the district helped with that, was about 600,000/400,000. I do not remember which was the 600 and which was the 400. But if you go back far enough into the 60s and 70s, athletic fields were largely constructed by the schools themselves. They might have gotten some assistance from the district. They certainly got help from the communities and the booster clubs. So that field has probably been like that since it was put in 64, since 64. And there are a number of reasons for having that crown. One has to do if you're a football coach and you want to run the ball versus throw the ball. If you want to run the ball instead of throw it, you want it as high as it can be. Throw it, you want it lower. Then the other is the practical aspect if you want it to drain from center to side and end to end. So the price tag on, say again, not yet there. All right. So to fix that, J.L. Mann, $564,392. Riverside. Existing football field be modified to accommodate a 180-foot wide field suitable for lacrosse and soccer competition. The field sideline areas be regraded to accommodate relocation of existing drainage structures and the addition of new drainage infrastructure to provide adequate field width and runoff space for athletic play. The existing irrigation system be modified to accommodate necessary changes. One of the least expensive modifications, $257,293. Wade Hampton High School, the most narrow field in the district. The existing football field be modified to accommodate a 180-foot wide field suitable for lacrosse and soccer. The existing visitor side concrete bleacher area will be removed to make room for the expansion of the field. New aluminum bleachers will be installed in their place, appropriately sized for the athletic field expansion. The field will be regraded to provide appropriate slopes for athletic play and to provide adequate drainage for all areas on and off the playing surface. The irrigation system will be provided as a result of the regrading. New storm drainage infrastructure will be installed to accommodate the field reconstruction. $1,764,999. Now again, that is the most constricted field we have. And we cannot demo part of the concrete bleachers on the visitor side because if we demo part of them, we have to bring the entire structure up to current code. So the cheaper, expensive as this is, the cheaper solution is demo the whole side. You all may recall, been around a while, when the new Wade Hampton was built, a new home side was constructed on what was the visitor side. And what was the home side, concrete seating, became the visitor side. Then there are various modifications needed at Blue Ridge, Fountain Inn, Greer, and Southside. They're in the grand scheme of things, they're relatively minor, addressing sideline drainage issues to ensure having that minimum width of 180 feet. All of those, Blue Ridge, Fountain Inn, Greer, and Southside, total together $700,365. So to use existing fields And to get them the minimum width, if we want to establish that at being 60 yards, the least expensive path forward with our existing fields comes in at $4.3 million. Now, we looked at all kind of things. For example, at Wade Hampton, we looked at going over to their secondary field and converting it. It costs more than doing the work at the stadium because there's not enough parking over there. And you got to relocate a number of things there. We looked at, so I mentioned this earlier, we looked at site acquisition. If you go get sites, but they're remote to the campus, it creates a whole nother set of issues. And you got to build restrooms, and you've got to build concession stands. So the cost escalates on all that. Now, you all ask about artificial turf. For a number of years, and we've looked at this probably for more than 10 years. And probably at the beginning of that 10 years, the estimate on doing a field would have been close to $3 million. The last several years, it's gotten closer to $2 million. Now, we believe that if we were to artificially turf our stadium fields, the installation of that turf would allow the drainage to occur in such a way that we could get 180 feet. We don't know that for certain, but we believe that at this point. So the other thing that has happened, and this has happened within the last month, there's another district in the state that took a different approach to putting in artificial turf. They employed a third-party consultant to examine their fields, to spec them, and to manage the bids that they let. And they were able to go from about $2 million a field down to around 1.4 a field. So that's a pretty significant difference. We believe that difference is significant enough that we're going to engage this same third party. It's an architectural and engineering firm, but they have an particular expertise in athletic facilities, to study all 15 and give us an estimate of what they believe it would cost to do all 15 schools. And simultaneously, would the installation of that turf occur in such a manner that we could get the minimum width that we desire to get, which would be 180 feet. Maybe we get more than that, but we'd want to get at least to a minimum of 180. So we're not funding and creating a disparity between and among our own schools that compete with each other. So we asked Colonel Carlin to reach out to that company and secure them. Their price to do that lies within our ability to secure A&E for, lack of a better term, exploratory purposes, to see if that might be a viable solution. The other thing that we found in their handling of bidding artificial turf projects, they have provided for additional padding underneath the surface of the turf to help offset concerns about player injury on artificial turf. There is a concern about that. You've seen probably a lot of reports from the NFL players group that they have a concern about playing on artificial turf related to injury. So the additional padding provides some additional protection against injury. It does not necessarily address the give and take of the field surface. We'd have to find out more about that from those consultants. So right now, our path forward, absent being directed differently by the board, is we're going to pursue getting the information to see, is this a viable path forward if you consider all the other aspects of, more important than field width, the tremendous wear and tear, particularly on the schools that have lacrosse, soccer, and football. Because when you think about the amount of play on those fields. Now, in some cases, there are things they can do to do some scheduling differently. They may need to play their JV matches in a place other than their stadium field to get some of the wear off of that. We're literally wearing out the turf on those fields. Now, you see, as part of a stopgap to that, we put in the general fund budget some additional funding for chemical treatment and for overseeding with rye to try to address that problem. But we're literally killing those fields by overuse. And when you start looking at trying to find property, and then all the other accoutrements that you have to provide to support having a field on a remote site, may be a wise investment to look now that the price is down way below what it was when we first started looking at them, and I would argue significantly below the $2 million. And I think the part I left out is the district that just got the about $1.4 million price on theirs. They bid these a year ago, and their prices were about $2 million a field. So that's where we are. That's what we intend to explore, and we are moving forward, bringing those consultants in to look at all 15 fields, so that we might come back to you with, hey, you can do this solution, this solution. While this one might be more expensive up front, maybe in the long term, it might be a better solution. Realizing that once you put it in, there is maintenance. You don't obviously don't cut the grass anymore, but there is a brushing that has to occur in that field. But over time, just like you saw in that report on what we spend on athletics, where we've had to resurface rubberized tracks, there is a maintenance for this over time, and has to be at some point replaced. And so we want to look at what's the lifetime expectancy of that. Theoretically, if you don't wear a field from too much use with turf, you don't maybe ever have to replace it unless you had to go in there and tear out the irrigation system for some reason. But we didn't mention this in the other. We have people that we have our folks in our employee that are expert in maintaining athletics. Wyndham sitting back there, he's got a degree. You can tell by looking at his tie where it came from. But he's got a degree in turf management. Shane now runs all of maintenance, but his replacement, his successor, Tom Vaughn, also has a degree related to turf management and did that kind of work for the Panthers. We have several people within grounds that actually are or were licensed golf course superintendents. So we have knowledge and expertise. We have the equipment. What we're having trouble keeping up with is the constant wear and demand created by playing in the middle of the field all the time. Now, if you do have a wider field, you can choose to offset soccer and lacrosse goals to minimize some of that midfield wear if you choose to do that. But we believe that that the pricing is now at a point that it makes sense for us to pause on doing this and get more information as to what the cost of that would look like. I'll be glad to answer any questions that
Thank you, Dr. Royster. I know Ms. Mosley has a question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brett. I do have a couple of questions. So, Dr. Royster, the $4.3 million that you just presented to us, you presented this to us as sort of an FYI. If we were to fix these things, this is how much it would cost, correct? It's not included in our upcoming budget?
No.
And it's something, okay, so my understanding, our general fund budget is how much?
The proposed new one is, Robin, 922 million and some change.
Okay, so since this is considered a one-time expense, would it come out of that fund, or what would you recommend?
We would either recommend it come from the building fund.
Okay.
Or, as you all will recall, this is the final year of ESSER. We will have a larger than usual fund amount, revenue in excess of expense, that we could recommend that you all take one-time expenditures from that. As we have recommended and you all have approved, I guess for the last 3 years, we've used that to accelerate or add building projects. So this could come from fund balance, or it could come from the capital budget. Right now, we have money in the capital budget for next year under the athletic line item in the capital budget to do 2 of these, probably.
Okay, so so in theory, if you were to bring this to us, are we talking in the near future? Are you talking like a phased out, so you would choose 2 off the list and start with that? Or we wouldn't try to do them all at one time? I mean,
I think that would depend on what that consultant tells us.
Okay.
If we were at 1.4, that'd be $21 million.
Okay.
If we were at 1.4. Now, we don't know what peculiarities we might have versus what they had in doing this. The example I was using was Darlington County. So we might have some uniqueness to our facilities that were not applicable there, but if you used 1.4, that'd be 21 million.
Okay, so let me just make sure I'm understanding timing. You're gonna move forward with this consultant. They're gonna give you an estimate on what it would cost to do artificial turf at all 15 schools?
Yes.
And then compare it to what you've proposed here, trying to decide what's our bang for our buck, so to speak.
And then provide you all with that recommendation.
And provide us with our recommendation. So are we thinking within the next year this isn't, or a few months, or what kind of timing?
I would hope their work would be concluded 30 days, Scott, or is that too ambitious? 45 days?
So this could be coming to us sooner versus later?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
August.
So then,
Perhaps.
My second
September, maybe.
Okay. My second point of clarification, and this is just based on past conversations you and I have had about artificial turf specifically. I know one athletic director that would be thrilled to hear this, but isn't there I think you told me there's like a life of that. I mean, it's not like you put artificial turf in and it lasts forever. So what type of ongoing, expenditure would we be looking at, or is it, and would that be just something, if you put them all, I guess, would you roll out the artificial turf in like a phased out approach like you did the weight room, so that we kind of get on because we can't be replacing it all at the same time too.
If we do it, probably the more prudent way to do it would be, as you're suggesting, even if you set the money aside, like from fund balance,
right,
to do it all at one time, to maybe do it over a 3-year span. So when you get out, whatever the life is,
right,
if it's 15 years, it would be year 15, year 16, and year 17. And likely, just like some of the other estimating that we do in the Mars forecast, we estimate a life, but sometimes some of it lasts longer than that estimated, and some of it doesn't quite make it. So even if you do them all the same year, it'll spread a little bit.
Okay.
If you spread it over 3 years, it would spread even more, logically.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mrs. Mosley. Ms. LaVentus Wells?
Thank you. Dr. Royster, are there any other high schools in South Carolina using this AstroTurf?
Yeah. Almost all of if you go back to Coach Nance's presentation of those that we compared ourselves to, Charleston, Horry, Richland 1, Beaufort, Pickens, Lancaster, Lex Rich 5, Rock Hill 3, Anderson 5, Spartanburg 5, and Spartanburg 7. The only one that he surveyed that did not, besides us, was Berkeley.
And have we spoken to their ADs to find out the pros and cons of this AstroTurf?
Sure, Coach Nance had numerous conversations with athletic directors about that.
And how long what is the longevity that they've had these fields in place?
Most of those school districts have put the turf in the last 3 to 4 years. I think Rock Hill 3's probably had it longer than anybody else. Lifespan historically has been 10 to 12 years. But the turf has significantly improved. The quality of the synthetics has really improved over the years. So lifespan is probably 12 and beyond. It's insured. Insurance has not always kept up with lifespan. So that's something we would have to consider.
What kind of injuries have they incurred compared to grass?
Injuries increase. I'm not sure they've done a study on that. We would do a definite study on that with our people. And there are definite advantages. There's pros and cons. You can play on it when it's a little wet. It always looks good. You get the lines in it. You don't have to paint lines. You know, we can save money there. There's some disadvantage. It still takes maintenance. It gets really hot. And there's a injury issue that's typically associated with it. Most ACL injuries, most knee injuries that occur are non-contact injuries. Doesn't matter if it's on grass or turf. The fact that you can put the extra padding, and that's something that's important now for the contact. You know, original AstroTurf was on asphalt. You may as well have been playing in the parking lot. It's not that way anymore. So you would have like GMAX testing, which is what happens when a helmet hits the field. And GMAX on a turf field with a mat is going to be softer than a helmet hitting ground. So there's pros and cons for both.
And how many fields at Clemson use it? That's it. Okay, thank you. My other question is, Dr. Royster, that dip in J.L. Mann's, they would have to put additional padding to level that field off in order to put the AstroTurf down?
Whether you put AstroTurf there or you put natural turf, it's got to be regraded.
Okay, so that you're going to do that anyway to level. It's not going to have that dip or anything.
Well, it's not really a dip.
It's just
it's sloped.
Slopes.
Like this. There's about this much slope this way, but there's about this much slope this way.
You're going to run it or pass it?
Well, you want it up the center of the field.
Exactly.
There must have been some reason they did that to begin with, but whoever did that's probably long gone, and we never figure out a way to duplicate what their thought process was to do that.
But the main thing is that that field will be leveled.
It would have an appropriate slope to it.
All right, I look forward to hearing the pros and cons of the AstroTurf and injury. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levinas-Wells. Dr. Presley?
Dr. Royster, in ESSER 3, would that full 2,100 ballpark be available with that surplus in ESSER 3? 21 million, beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Long morning.
Yes.
So that would be in that remaining ESSER. Thank you.
We know that simply based on the amount that we have in the general fund budget that gets journal entry to ESSER at the closeout of the year. Now, it might limit other things you could do, but there would certainly be $21 million.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. Mr. Sailors?
Well, that ESSER 3 would give you the 21 million, which would cover the price per on turf. But does it also have in ESSER enough money to cover, for example, demolition at Wade Hampton? Because that is, if you go with turf at Wade Hampton, for example, you still have to offer additional width. So are you still talking about taking the visitor stands out there? You wouldn't have to?
We don't think we'll have to. That's one of the first things we want that consultant to look at.
Okay, so
we think we can get it because you no longer have to have those exposed storm drains.
Right. They can be under
Got
the
drainage underneath. Basically, it's, I guess for lack of a better description, Scott, it's buried under the feet.
under the pad.
That's correct.
Okay, so
you got usable edge to edge, which we don't have now.
so what you're going to come back to us in August or September is going to be Plan A, Plan B. Plan A is turf using this. Plan B is artificial using whatever attachments that need to come with that. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that only cover that plan will only cover the football stadium, the primary field of each campus.
That's correct.
It will not cover practice fields or anything like that. Okay. Contractors that install turf, Scott, correct me if you disagree with this, are like contractors that build greenhouses. They're rare to get the one that specializes in turf. So just so everyone manages expectations moving forward, it would take roughly 2, maybe 3 years to accomplish all of this at one time. Am I correct? You can't do it in one off season.
I have not spoken extensively with the consultant, but it would be interesting to see if any of these likely competitors would be able to knock out 15 in a year.
And I'm not sure back to Ms. Mosley's point that we'd want to do that anyway.
No, because the scheduling would be a nightmare.
Well, that and to try to stagger the replacement down the road.
To your point, the warranty on it's 10 years unless they've changed it recently. So you'll get 12 years out of it. But you've got schools like, I'll use Carolina just off the top of my head. They may use the main stadium less than J.L. Mann or Wade Hampton. So you've got those usage components that take into account the longevity or the durability of the stadium. So that helps you years from now. But to that point, your recommendation would also come back with a plan to essentially squirrel away some cash to replace these bad boys when they wear out.
Yeah, we do. I think likely we'd adopt the same
as you do with HVAC
practice. Exactly. We'd use the same Mars concept. So, we put a little more in there every year as all systems age, so that we're not having to budget for all HVAC the year it dies. There's some sitting there for the ones that die sooner and the ones that die on schedule and the ones that die later. So, yeah, we'd need to, as we go over time and access building fund, we need to take into account, all right, now we're putting in place another system that has a life expectancy. Really, we don't have that with turf.
Right.
I mean, that becomes more of it's an ongoing maintenance issue. You're not doing anything to extend the life, so it doesn't really qualify. A drainage project would qualify under capital, but just extending the turf life doesn't qualify as capital anyway.
I would ask when you come back to the board with a recommendation that you please include, when it comes to the existing turf component, the grass, that we also know the numbers for what it takes to annually maintain that application, not only from a manpower standpoint, but for chemicals, fertilizer, so forth. And then the same with the artificial turf. So if we go with turf on 15 football stadiums, we're going to need to mobilize someone, to your point, manage it, which is going to require different equipment and training processes and so forth.
I'm going to guess your break even on that may be about the same, because we're only going to take one field out of turf maintenance.
Right.
Still got all baseball, softball, all the practice
Correct.
fields.
But you're still
You've
going
got to have some specialized equipment.
Exactly.
So probably the labor cost might stay relatively static. Once we bought that equipment, but over time you got to replace it. We got to know more about it, because we don't really have. We probably got some people who've had. I know that Tom has had experience with artificial turf. Shane, I don't know if you had direct experience with it or not, but it's something that a lot of us. I got a whole lot of experience over the years with turf, but not with artificial turf.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Does anyone else have any questions that I might have missed? Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Royster, for that. Moving on to 5.02. This is an action item, the Metropolitan Sewer Subdistrict Sanitary Sewer Right-of-Way and Easement Request at New Bryson Middle School property. Dr. Royster, do you have anything to add to this one?
Just quite simply, as it explains in there, this is to get us access to maintain and operate the sanitary sewer line at the site of the New Bryson Middle School. Colonel Carlin, is anything of particular note unusual about this?
The only thing I would say is that we originally thought when we purchased this site, we would have to go off-site onto somebody else's property to obtain that sewer. So not only does this provide it to us directly on our site, but avoids any off-site costs we would have to connect.
Thank you, Colonel Carlin. Do we have a recommended motion? We do have a recommended motion from the administration to approve the temporary construction easement and permanent sanitary sewer right-of-way as requested by the Metropolitan Sewer Subdistrict at 905 Fairview Road for the New Bryson Middle School. Do I have a maker of the motion?
Madam Chairman, I move to accept the administration's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We've got a first and a second. Any questions? All right, with no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Looks like we passed. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Moving on now to 5.03, the facilities project report. Dr. Royster?
Excuse me. Thank you, Ms. Brett. Certainly Colonel Carlin or I will try to answer any question you might have. What I would bring to your attention is this project report now includes all the major summer projects. So you would see that as an addition: painting, asphalt reconditioning, major HVAC, building envelope projects, some athletic program projects. Those normal summer projects that we would consider to be major projects.
Anyone have any questions? Ms. Mosley?
Thanks. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through here as quickly as I can, so if I've overlooked it, the parking lots expansion that we approved, Dr. Royster, was it 3 of the high schools? 4. Is that?
I believe there are 4 funded.
Okay. Are those here? I mean.
What's the status of those, Colonel?
We're in the process of developing the solicitation to go out for those. What I would recommend is once we have that secured, we'll add it to the project report.
Is it possible for the first and the second one to be done this? I feel sure it's possible for the first one to be done this summer. I'm not sure about the first.
Possibly awarded.
Okay, so just clarification, when you said awarded, not completed, because I was under the impression, I was told that Eastside, for example, would be
I think Eastside
first and would be ready to go for next school year.
I think Eastside's the first one.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And you got how many days left on solicitation?
I have to check with Jamie Bent. It's not in procurement yet. We're developing the solicitation now.
Okay.
So
possible before school starts?
I don't think we'd be able to get it before school start.
Okay. All right, I need to correct some information then. Thank you.
I guess on the plus side of that is it won't interfere with anything. It can continue, construction on it can continue after school starts.
That's what I was going to wonder.
Yes,
you think it'll be
yeah.
open?
It's not, it's in such a location that it should not interfere with the normal operation of school.
No, sir.
So it could be started and completed and operating during the school year next year? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley, and I believe Dr. Presley has a question as well.
What is the order for the 4? I know Eastside is first.
Scott, the order of the 4, Eastside is first. It's the order of the first 4.
Eastside certainly being first. The other ones, we're still determining what those would be. More than likely, Hillcrest or Jailman second, and then Greenville. We're still looking at where we would acquire
most
property.
difficult one because of site acquisition. The other 2 do not require site acquisition.
Correct.
So likely the order would be those two and then Greenville High. We're in negotiation over a piece of property that we remain far apart in our belief as to the value of that piece of property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think it's a surprise.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. And Ms. Levinas Wells has a question.
Yes. Colonel, on the heating and air conditioning for Summit Drive, will that take place this summer? Okay. And it will be completed before the children come back?
That's correct.
All right. And then the asphalt for League Academy on the sports courts, when will that take place?
That'll happen this summer as well.
Okay. And that will pretty much be taken care of before the students return?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. No further questions.
Thank you, Colonel Carlin. Thank you, Ms. Levinas Wells. I believe that concludes the building and grounds portion of our agenda. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Stiles.
Thank you, Ms. Brett, for chairing the Building and Grounds. This concludes our Committee of the Whole meeting for today. I need a motion to adjourn the Cal meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Linda Levinas Wells has made the motion. Ms. Brett has seconded. It is moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. The Committee of the Whole meeting concludes at 12:36. Just a reminder to all the board members, we have a special call meeting to discuss personnel matters and to receive legal advice pertaining to Title IX immediately following, and we'll meet in conference room A.
What are you doing about lunch?
Lunch is also here, a box lunch.